Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
And we welcome you to this special edition of the Black Gold Banneret Podcast. I'm Eric Lopez alongside Brian Murphy. This is a UCF Rewind edition of the Black Gold Banneret. This is one of these episodes that we'll be doing throughout where we go back in time. We go back in some classic UCF moments, some games, some stories from UCF athletics history, and dissect it like no one before and have people that were around it and discuss some of the behind-the-scenes stories that maybe you don't know about it when you watched it live. And today, we'll focus on UCF's NCAA Tournament March run a year ago in 2019 for men's basketball, including the Classic against Duke. And, of course, Mr. Brian Murphy, you got to see every dribble of the NCAA tournament run for UCF, and you were there for most of the year covering UCF basketball. And I think it's only fitting that we start this debut of Rewind programming with the anniversary here of a game and a run that was pretty memorable. And I know while painful, still a lot to be proud of as we'll get into on this episode.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the best season in program history. I don't think that's arguable. It's amazing that it's only been a year. It feels like, for me, this feels like it's so long ago. I think because of all the change that the program has experienced since then. I mean, you look at this game, when you look at the Duke game or any game last season, and there's just so many guys off that team that are no longer here. It feels much longer than 1 year. But yeah, here we are, 1 year anniversary from our trip to South Carolina
against Duke. Coming up, we'll break down the game and some things you may not remember from the game and some of the storylines and the aftermath of that game and some of the impact for the program, including, was this the tournament that was the beginning of, as we know it, Tacko Mania? Also, what was the bigger storyline? Was it Coach Mike Krzyzewski against his protege, his former player, Johnny Dawkins, or was it Zion versus Tacko? We'll discuss that, plus some of the more controversial plays within the game. We'll discuss that, and also the lasting impact from that game moving forward and immediately. Of course, you could follow us on blackandgoldbanneret.com. We'll have UCF content there throughout and on social media on Twitter. And feel free to tweet us any games you want us to recap or stories from back in the day. We will do that throughout this time period. We'll certainly go back into some football games and other UCF sporting events. We'll look back on them in a lot of events. And, of course, you can do that at UCF_Banneret on Twitter. And, of course, you can like us on Facebook as well. But, Murph, let's begin. Before we get into the whole Duke game and the University of the Duke game, there's a path. How do you get to that point? And I think that's the thing that's so fascinating about this run in this episode is we're celebrating kind of a week, and I think some of us have maybe taken it for granted or forgotten, but a fact that UCF got into the NCAA tournament for the first time since 2005 when they won the ASUN championship against Gardner-Webb. Hadn't been to the NCAA tournament since. Really wasn't close. There was the Donnie Jones first year where they kind of were ranked and undefeated and had a great start and kind of faded in conference play. But this was kind of 2 years in the making. And I think it goes back to, Murph, when UCF made the run to the NIT Final Four in Coach Dawkins' first year. And UCF beats Illinois in the quarterfinals to advance to the Final Four, and the court storms. And Coach Johnny Dawkins speaks to all the fans that were on the floor. It was such an iconic image. I remember being in the building. And then they lose to TCU in the Final Four. But that was kind of the beginning of, well, you know what? Maybe this is the group that's finally going to get us to that NCAA tournament. Unfortunately, the following year, UCF dealt with a ton of injuries. Aubrey Dawkins, who we hadn't seen at that point. But everybody kept hearing about him, how this guy's going to be fantastic. He's going to replace Matt Williams, and he's going to graduate. Well, he injures his shoulder, so we never see him play the following year. Then B.J. Taylor gets hurt early in the season. I think it was the first game of the year. Misses a chunk of the year, right? The first half.
First half of the first game against Mercer.
He gets hurt in the first game, so he's out for a period of time. By the time he gets back, then Tacko gets hurt, and he misses the rest of the year. That team never got together. We saw him in Orlando. They had a winning season despite all the injury issues, but got blown out by Houston, didn't make postseason. And that led us into this upcoming season where now all of a sudden the feeling I felt was, if it's not this year, when will it be? But just talk about that journey because, to make the tournament, it wasn't a given. And there was certainly adversity, ups and downs, and roller coaster that I think is very ironic because we'll see that throughout the Duke game. I think was a telling sign of this group and what they had to face during this run.
Right, but if there was ever a year in which everyone knew this team had to put it together, it was 2018, 2019. Because we knew that all these guys were not going to come back most likely. BJ and Tacko and Chad Brown were seniors. Aubrey had that, that sort of, if he had a good season, he would be off the NBA. This was really their one opportunity with the guys on the roster to make something out of this. And unfortunately, like you said, they did not get a chance to do that in the year before just because of bad luck. But we got to see, really fortunately, although it ended probably earlier than they would have liked, we got to see this group of guys, the most talented roster that UCF has ever put together, put through a full healthy season, and the return was historic.
It really was, and it would be a 20-plus win season for them. It was a year where the expectations were super high. There was urgency. 23-8, but it wasn't a smooth 23-8, Murph, right? I mean, it's funny. We look back and further away from it, we kind of forget. There were some hiccups. They lost to FAU at home where they blew a big lead in November 11th. Lost a game on the, beat Alabama, which thought was great, but then they lost a game at Missouri in overtime that they probably felt they should have won. And I think there were still questions going into conference play. And I think the turning point to me was January 27th, UCF went to Memphis where they never play well and got blown out. And I remember we did a Banneret episode, and Jeff was hosting and he was calling for the panic button. Is it panic time? Everybody was panicking at that point. And even you, I don't think you were panicking, but you did have concerns at that point.
No, absolutely. Well, one of it was this team never plays well at Memphis. And if they needed, and for some reason, it's not even just Memphis, it's in the FedEx Forum. It's in that building. You can go back to when UCF was in the Conference USA. They're playing tournaments in there. They never did well. And so the feeling was if this team went into that arena on the bubble, because that's where they were hosting the conference tournament, if they had to go do work there in that building, how much faith do you have in this team to do work if they need to win some games to get in the tournament? So that was the real concern for me. I thought just in that game alone, it was a bad matchup just in terms of Memphis is going to run you out the building. If you let them control pace, they really take Tacko out of the game and make him a non-factor, and they're just more athletic than you. And that's what they did that day. But look, this season, I think they rebounded from that with the win over Memphis later on. They beat Memphis back at home, and then down the stretch, they crush SMU by about 1,000 points in one of the most dominant performances I've ever seen UCF basketball play. They go to South Florida, win the War 9-4, and then those last two games, the pivotal stretch at the very end of the season at Houston and at home against Cincinnati on senior night, they had to win at least one of those two games. They ended up winning both of them, and by that point, we had known that no matter what happens, they're in the tournament.
When did you feel that moment they were a tournament team? I think you felt like, was it when they beat Cincinnati and everybody stormed the court on senior night? Was that when you felt? I thought it was the Houston game when they won. There was College Game Day was there. Jay Billis is like, they've sealed their fate. I felt that's when they were going to be in the NCAA tournament. That's when it hit me. When was it for you? Was it Cincinnati? Was it Houston?
It was Cincinnati for me, and I was at the Houston game. I remember that very well. Hakeem Olajuwon was there. I mean, it was a big-time deal, obviously, with Game Day. And the winning streak that Houston had, I believe they had 33 consecutive home victories going into that game. And that win was obviously fantastic. And I think I understand those who believe that they were in the tournament at that point. But if they had come out and I think lost the next three games, I that would have really put them in jeopardy. But coming back off the Houston win and getting another top 25 victory at home against Cincinnati, that sealed it. That absolutely sealed it. Back-to-back top 25 wins in this conference, which was a really good league last year, better than the Pac-12. That sealed it. So for me, it was really a Cincinnati win. Once that game was over, I knew they were in no matter what.
Of course, following the win against Cincinnati, great moment, senior night, really great legacy for BJ and Tacko and that senior group to go out that way as their last home game. They lose at Temple at the end of the regular season. That was a game where Aubrey Dawkins exploded, if I'm not mistaken, kept them in the game.
Absolutely.
Which would be kind of ironic, foreshadowing a little bit down the road. And then they get to Memphis for the conference tournament quarterfinal. They get blown out by Memphis, 79-55. And so they go 23-8. I think everybody felt good. They were in the tournament, Murph. Now, you stayed in Memphis to cover the entire tournament. Take me through your moment there. Selection Sunday. You're waiting. And we didn't have to wait long because UCF would be in. UCF got announced. They would be in South Carolina. They would take on VCU in the 8-9. And if they win, they more than likely would get to play Duke. What was your initial reaction when you saw the bracket live?
Yeah, it was the first pod announced. You had the Duke versus I think the 16 seed. I'm not sure if that was a play-in game or not. I think they were playing North Dakota State, but it was Duke and the 16 seed, and then boom, there's UCF. Like, okay, hello. So the suspense ended quickly, and I thought for the seed they got, you could tell again. It was correct in that. They were not close to the bubble by the point they had beaten Cincinnati. You can argue that maybe the Houston game, even if they lose Cincinnati, they still would have been in because they were in by such a margin that they really weren't that close to the bubble. Maybe they could afford to have lost the Cincinnati game. But as it was, your mind just popped at that possible matchup on a Sunday against the best team in the nation. But first, they had to get through VCU.
Oh, by the way, opening round game against VCU from the 8-10. We thought it would be a defensive game. You got there, I know, prior to the game. I think it was a day. You were there a day before, right? Were you there a day before?
Yeah.
Take me through it. What was the talk? What was the mood up there going into this game? And it's funny, you got an interesting pod because your pod included Virginia. And what's funny about this storyline, and so many stories about this, Virginia was like in the early afternoon session, and they were the 1 seed once again, and they were struggling. They were losing again, and everybody was blowing up on social media, myself included. Was like, are we going to see Virginia lose for the second year in a row in the first round in a 1-16? And you were watching that in person, so you had that storyline developing. And then, oh, by the way, you got Zion Williamson, who's the biggest star in college basketball, a marquee program at Duke. You've got Johnny Dawkins, former Dookie, leading UCF. And, oh, by the way, you got VCU. Give me the chatter leading up into the first game of that session and then going into that Virginia game and throughout the day.
Well, the Virginia game, again, was just odd because they were – again, you mentioned how there was so much pressure on Virginia back as a 1 seed and then playing Gardner Webb as a 16 and then down by 6 at the half of that game. And everyone's like, you got to be kidding me. This cannot possibly happen again. And, of course, it didn't. But, my Lord, watching that game was pretty phenomenal. Just I can't imagine what Virginia fans were feeling like. For UCF, preparing for their Friday night tip-off, a late Friday night start, it was not a lot of I think it was just a lot of we're not satisfied. And they understood that as much as this was a landmark for them, getting a seed, like they had never been an at-large in school history. That was a big thing. Understanding the legacy that these seniors were going to have and making sure they went out and performed the right way, that was a big thing. But it wasn't like they didn't really stress any happy to be there. They didn't say they were happy to be there. And then for the game overall, though, I thought the biggest storyline wasn't really UCF. It was Marcus Evans for VCU. He's their best player by far. However, in the A-10 tournament, he had, I think, sprained his ankle and was really questionable to play in this game. And that was the big issue. If he doesn't play, UCF could romp here. And I think going in, I believe UCF was a 1-point favorite. But they end up steamrolling over VCU for 2 reasons. One, Marcus Evans did play, but was nowhere near close to 100%. And 2, Tacko Fall. I mean, Tacko Fall, we'll get into it more in the Duke game, but as much as we talk about Aubrey Dawkins, this was Tacko Fall's weekend. He owned it in both of the games they played, but especially against VCU. They had no way of stopping him.
Well, what's interesting, though, it was such a bizarre game because UCF couldn't hit anything to start the game, Murph.
Sure.
The joke was this team ever going to score? I think they started out 0 for 10. Luckily, VCU didn't score much either, and I think they went like 6.5.
Yep.
UCF went 6.5 minutes without a point. But yet they were only down 5-2 with 13:37 to go in the first half. But I remember it was like, and I was watching it in person, and fans on social media like, oh boy, this could be a long night. It wasn't. We weren't thinking, oh yeah, this will be a breeze at that point here.
No, it wasn't. But what happened was UCF's defense continued to stay the course, and VCU's the team that couldn't hit shots. And they had open shots. Certainly late in the first half, they had open shots. The defense was partly the reason why VCU went into a drought. But sometimes you just don't hit. And VCU goes on this stretch of about 10 minutes, about 9-10 minutes, where they do not score a point between the first half and the second half. And that allowed UCF to go up by 20 all of a sudden. And that was pretty much all she wrote.
Yeah, I mean, the key point, I remember, it was tied at 24 with 4.5 to go. UCF outscored them 10-0 to end the half, including threes by Terrell Allen and Frank Burtz hitting threes.
Whoa.
I mean, hey, how about those names hitting it up? And then you mentioned kind of carried it over to the second half in the game. Virginia Commonwealth only shot 29% in the first half, did not hit a three. UCF was winning the battle in the boards. You mentioned they went up as much as 19 points, 43-24, and it looked like it was going to be a cakewalk. VCU made a run, but was too little, too late. UCF won the game 73-58.
Ahead the van, 10 seconds to end it. And 2 on the board for Santos Silva, as well as Oklahoma and Virginia here in Columbia. Well, a slow start, but brilliant the rest of the way. Johnny Dawkins in his 100th game on the bench for UCF.
First ever win for the program in the NCAA tournament. Have we taken that for granted? I kind of feel, Murph, we don't talk about that enough. And I understand maybe because it wasn't the most artistic game. But, and that's one of the interesting things about this. More people, I think, still talk, even UCF fans, we still talk about the Duke game instead of the fact that, shoot, we just won our first ever NCAA tournament game. Let's not take that for granted because there's a lot of programs that haven't won an NCAA tournament game and may never win an NCAA tournament game.
And dominated and convincingly won that game and deserved to win that game. Yeah, probably. I think part of it is because they didn't beat a quote unquote power conference team. The A-10 is a great league, but it's not. And it's got a really, really good tournament history. Obviously, when you look back at what Shaka Smart did there, but this wasn't a blue blood program, so to speak. And so I think some of that has to factor into it. Plus, yeah, the Duke game does tend to really suck all of the oxygen out of the room because as much as we want to laud ourselves and the program for what they accomplished in that VCU game, it all ends the same way, and it's never easy to never easy to swallow.
I remember at that time I felt, whatever happens here on out, it's all great. It's ice cream. You know what I mean? It's all gravy because they got to the tournament, but then they won a game. So to me, the season was already a success. And maybe, and I think as we'll get into this later, that's why maybe my perspective on the Duke game is different than other people, perhaps, because that was a big moment. I mean, I didn't know that was ever going to happen.
Yeah, I certainly did. It's difficult because you want that immediate feedback from the players and coaches. And after the game, neither BJ and Coach Dawkins, they didn't mention how this was a big thing for the program to accomplish, but they did not rest on it at all. They wouldn't go into what this means, and because partly they were in the moment of just winning the game, so it's hard to reflect on it. But 2, they knew they had more business to accomplish less than 48 hours later. So even when we talked to them on Saturday on their practice day, and I asked them about the VCU game, that was all gone. I mean, they had begun preparing for Duke really late Friday night. So it was really hard to get them to talk about the VCU game because it had to be so quickly forgotten.
Well, UCF did win 73-58. They would get Duke, of course, in a prime slot on CBS on that Sunday, March 24th. Maybe one of the most prime positions to be in the NCAA tournament. And when we come back, we'll get into it leading into that Duke game and get into the ball game, including what was the bigger storyline? Was it Coach K versus Johnny Dawkins, or was it Zion versus Tacko? And how did Tacko feel? Was this the weekend that Tacko Mania, as we know it now, began? We'll get into all that and much more. You're listening to this special Black and Gold Banneret Podcast, UCF Rewind.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.
Welcome back to this edition of the Black and Gold Banneret. We look back to UCF's March to Madness, the UCF men's basketball 2018-2019 run to the NCAA tournament in their iconic matchup with Duke. Murph, let's get into it now. We're into the day, and I think some things that jumps out prior to the game that was interesting to me. You know, when the brackets came out, hey, the initial story was, hey, Johnny Dawkins versus Coach K, right? That's the big storyline, right? Aubrey Dawkins was a superstar player, really helped Mike Krzyzewski build the Duke program to what it was now. They got to their first ever Final Four in NCAA national title game in '86, where they lost to Louisville. So that was kind of a given. But I think the thing that fascinated me, Murph, especially once the matchup was set, that really the majority of the media at that point, while they did focus on that story, there was another storyline that they were more interested in, and that was the fact of Tacko Fall versus Zion Williamson leading into it. They were talking about it as far as, you know, hey, this is the biggest matchup. There were Jay Billis and Scott Van Pelt. I remember we were talking about it on SportsCenter. In fact, I have an article here, headline, from the Orlando Sentinel that came out leading in to that game here, folks. UCF focusing on more than just Tacko Fall versus Zion, written by Brian Murphy. Hey, what do you know?
Some dynamite research there.
So you obviously went that direction. So just tell us a little bit leading up to the game of the media. Was Tacko versus Zion a bigger deal for the media and the people around there? Did you sense that bigger than even, say, Coach K versus Johnny Dawkins?
Yeah, actually, this is a little inside media, but I was told to sort of stay away from a lot of the Tacko Zion stuff, because the Sentinel was already going to have other people writing about that anyway, because it's such a big deal. So, yeah, I think, look, for me, just my personal point of view, the better story is the Johnny Dawkins, Coach K story with the Aubrey Dawkins side angle as well, because it's a story of 35 years in the making. And yeah, they had coached against each other once before when Johnny was at Stanford. Coach K was at Duke, obviously, and they play each other in a coaches versus cancer game. And I actually asked Coach K about that game, if he remembered it at all. And he kind of mocked me a little bit by saying, you know, I've coached a lot of games. There's only so much brain space. I can't remember every single one of them. So he didn't remember. But Johnny obviously did. He was asked about it, and Johnny remembers coaching against him at that point and said that this game coming up against Duke, because they'd already faced each other, did sort of, it helped. It helped sort of trim a lot of the awkwardness, out, because they'd already done this. And I thought with that, and with Aubrey growing up around the program, and Aubrey practicing in Duke's gym with his father every day after practice, when Johnny was on his staff for 10 years, that was a better story. However, the media gravitates, as we should, to the more attractive, sexier angle, which is the 7'6", immovable object versus the 280-pound guard center, irresistible force. That cries out for big, TV ratings and eyeballs. We want to see that. And then Tacko kind of stirred things up a little bit. I mean, he didn't. But you're talking to Andy Katz after the game against VCU, and he was asked about Zion possibly dunking on him, because obviously Zion was obviously known for posterizing people. And Tacko said, "I will not allow it. I will not allow him to put me on one of his highlight reels." And that got all of us kind of wound up. And now we're looking for we're looking for quotes and people to sort of bite on that. But Tacko didn't really say anything that was too unusual there. I mean, what else is he going to say there? And I think Zion sort of echoed that when Zion was asked about it on Saturday. He basically said, "What else is he supposed to say? I mean, is he going to say I'm going to dunk on him?" So I think Zion understood where Tacko was coming from. Tacko was just standing up for himself, being a competitor, but everybody wanted to see that court-on-court battle.
I mean, I want to allow it. I want to allow him putting me on one of his highlight tapes. It's probably not going to happen, but I'm really looking forward to that game. It's going to be very competitive, and that's all you can ask for.
All right, so you're not going to allow him to dunk on you. How much would you like, though, to dunk on him?
Well, I'm right by the rim, so I guess it's a lot easier for me. But Zion is just so athletic, you never know what can happen during the game. But at the same time, dunking is a great highlight. But we're gonna go out there and try to win the game.
Everybody was talking about it on Twitter. Is he going to dunk on him? Is he not? I mean, it was insane. And this was, I think, at this point, Murph, Tacko Mania, and it was kind of like on liftoff. And I think it goes back to that VCU game, which, by the way, he was a monster. 13 points, 18 boards. I think he had like 5 blocks, altered a ton of shots. Yeah. Was the difference maker. I mean, VCU had no answer for him. And I remember on the broadcast, they had this picture of Grant Hill and Tracy Wolfson, the sideline reporter for CBS, standing next to him. And boy, did Bill Raftery just eat that up, man. They all ate that up. They loved the size. And then the post game, Tracy Wolfson, who I'm sure you've seen, not the tallest person. She's got to interview Tacko. She's like, how am I going to do this? And I think, Murph, America at that point just got hooked on Tacko Fall. They just, and I don't, it's just something about him that people, and obviously his height, people are always fascinated by tall people, right? Like it's very, and it's, about him. And I remember Scott Van Pelt's like, I root for the man. I beyond off the bat. I mean, everybody got behind Tacko there. Did you sense that being around there? Because I know that people covered Tacko and they always gave the stat about one of the tallest people during the college season, but that was, a fraction of the audience in the country. I thought the country at that point just got hooked on Tacko.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not that he's just tall. It's we like, Americans like extremes. We like superlatives. We like the biggest this or the most this or the fastest this or the highest this. And so Tacko, being literally one of the 40 tallest humans in the world, I mean, that's already something. I mean, it's amazing. And he's out here playing basketball. And as the year goes on, you can see him just become so much better as a basketball player while carrying all the weight and just this body that's so abnormal to look at. But and a guy of that size, to see him move with fluidity and move with real skill and that was something that he developed. And so now that you've seen him sort of grow into like this real product, you want to see what he could do against the best of the best. And that's what this game, that was one of the reasons why this game was so highly anticipated.
Duke had beaten North Dakota State in the first round. You got to see Zion for the first time prior to the UCF game in person. Explain what it's like to see Zion in person.
Again, he is they say he's 280, which is great. They can say he's 280 or 290 or more than 290. He's a guard center. He can cover every position. He can shoot. He can obviously drive. He's ferocious. He can tear shoes apart, which was what we saw in the regular season in a Duke game. He is a marvel. He is like Duke. I remember Coach K, the day before the game, was asked a question about Zion, and the question started out as, when you have a player like Zion, and at that point, Coach K interjected and goes, "You say like Zion. I don't have players like Zion. It's just Zion. If I had players like Zion, they'd all start. And it's true. There's no one like him at the college game. He's an absolute anomaly. He's just a mutant.
And he captivated America, right? Like that Duke. It's weird because Duke is always hated, right, in college basketball. I think there's that love-hate with Duke. A lot of people hate Duke. They think they get away with things, and they're whatever. And yet, Murph, throughout this year, this was the first time people enjoyed watching Zion play because we really hadn't seen anything like it, to the point where I think people were actually, maybe not admittedly, they were kind of rooting for Duke because they wanted to just see Zion keep playing. And it was very unique, and it's hard to accomplish that in college basketball. And I think that's what makes this run so special was this game had star power, which is not as easy as it used to be in college basketball. They were showing classic games over the weekend and things, and you saw the star power back then because players stayed longer in college basketball. That doesn't exist anymore. Mm-hmm. Like, if this tournament, let's say UCF was in the tournament this year and they would have played Kansas, I don't think it would have meant as much because Kansas doesn't have the star power that Duke team did. So all of a sudden you got a game that has coaching star power on both sides with Coach K and Johnny Dawkins, who people know. You've got star power with Zion, who's a casual, and because of Zion and the following of Duke, people know who R.J. Barrett was, who was going to be a high draft pick in the NBA. People even know, the team basically, and yet people knew who Tacko Fall was. They were learning about Tacko Fall, and they knew about Aubrey Dawkins. That's Johnny's kid. So I think you had some star power in this matchup that you don't normally see nowadays in the NCAA tournament, which I think added to the hype.
Absolutely. I mean, and like you said, it set the stage for just an amazing piece of art. And I know it's sports, but this was art just from the storylines and the stage and the announcing crew, the classic matchup of the blue blood powerhouse versus the upstarts. It was phenomenal. And then, and even if we want to add another layer to all of this, is the storyline that really wasn't delved into much during the broadcast, but the storyline of Danny White versus Kevin White, son versus father, UCF AD versus Duke's AD. We thought that Mike or Coach K and Coach Dawkins felt awkward about playing each other. Danny felt the same way about playing his father's program and said to us the day before the game, said it just. If they didn't have to do this, they wouldn't. They don't want to play against each other. They want to root for each other. And he remembers watching the bracket be unleashed on that selection Sunday, and he thought about VCU immediately, but then realized, that, oh my God, my father's team could be our second round matchup, and just said at that point, like, it's just not unfortunate, but it's just awkward, just very awkward for them to be matched up. So it was very awkward for so many people in this matchup to be put in this game, but this is what it was. Someone had to win.
Was Kevin White actually there? Because I'm trying to remember. I remember he was part of the committee, NCAA committee. So I remember there was mixed things. Was he allowed to be there? Was he not allowed to be there? I always heard conflict. Was he there? What do you remember there being there in person about that? Because you're right. That story didn't really go a lot, and it never got brought up on the CBS telecast. Now, my theory on that is I feel like that was material that they were going to use if the game was a blowout, except it never was. Maybe. And the game was so good, and they already had decided their two main plot lines was Tacko and Zion, and then Johnny Dawkins versus Coach K, that they felt they had plenty. And then the game itself took care of it. So I don't think they ever even thought about that concept about, let's throw the ADs. That tells you how good this game was, number one. But number two, what do you remember about that? Was Kevin White even around?
So Kevin White was not around that weekend. Danny actually said that he was in Jacksonville that weekend. He had a scheduling conflict. So Kevin White was not there. Johnny was there. And if you look at the broadcast, you can see Danny White, Eric Wood, former SID here at UCF, Andy Seeley, sitting about 2 rows behind the scorers table. But Danny was there, and and it was funny that Danny was asked before the game, again Saturday, if his dad, at Duke, helped him when it came to hiring Johnny Dawkins 4 years earlier to be the head coach. And he didn't say no. he basically just said, I'll use any relationships and assets I have. I think that's fascinating. And something I'd love to know more about is the conversations that Danny White had with his father when looking into hiring Johnny Dawkins to be their new head coach. And then 3 years later, they're playing each other on the biggest stage of the sport. I think that's fascinating. But no, it doesn't get its due because it's you've got the two amazing players, and then the 35-year relationship between Coach K and Johnny Dawkins, and then the game itself, which was okay.
Broadcast crew, you mentioned Jim Nantz calling the game with Grant Hill and Bill Raftery. And I know recently there was a big argument when Tony Romo got his big contract to stay at CBS and how valuable are broadcasters to a sporting event, and people go watch the broadcasters. And I think people kind of miss the point on this kind of stuff. Do people go out of their way to watch a sporting event to watch a broadcaster? No. But I do think broadcasters enhance the broadcast, and I do think people are like, hey, if he's doing that game, it's a big deal. And I think the fact that Jim Nantz, Bill Raftery, nothing to take away from the other great broadcast crews that are out there throughout the tournament. But I think the fact that it was Nantz, Raftery, Jim Nantz, who's been the voice of the Final Four since 1991. You have Grant Hill, who, by the way, ironically, as was just mentioned during the game, was the guest speaker at the UCF luncheon that before the season. How ironic is that? And then you got Bill Raftery, who's one of the biggest personalities in the history of college basketball. The fact that they were doing this game enhanced this game, right? Don't you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, it's like, Keith Jackson for college football or Vin Scully for baseball back in the day. Jim Nantz, it has, when Jim Nantz is calling a game, it's big. And then Raftery is one of the best personalities in college basketball, and Grant Hill has been a really good addition. I thought what's great about Grant Hill, and it was brought up during the broadcast, they said that Aubrey Dawkins received his first basketball hoop when he was a child from Grant Hill. I think that's just level.
That's great. And you could go ahead and tell the story. I mean, we're in the media, so when we see media people, hey, what's going on, everything. Very rarely you get people to mark out for a media person like I did at the American Conference Tournament at Amway. Because that was the year. That was a rare year. The only year that probably ever happened where the American Conference Tournament, the semifinals and the final, was going to be on CBS because the Big Ten that year was at Madison Square Garden, so they did it a week earlier because to comply with the Big East and all that. So Nantz, Raftery, and Hill were doing the American Conference Tournament at the Amway Center. And I remember we're in the quarterfinals. I think it was the game before the UCF Houston game. It had to have been – what was it? It was like Wichita State game. Had to have been a Wichita State game because it was a big crowd. And we're discussing like media people. And then Jim Nantz walks in. You could go ahead and tell the story from there because I went ahead and found you and I devised a very, very divisive game plan to like make sure I get a photo with Jim Nantz.
Well, yeah, no, I remember you telling me, look, before like at the first day of the tournament, look, right. I need to get I would like to get a photo with Jim Nantz. Before the tournament's over with. So I'm like, yeah, that's totally fine, totally great. And first of all, Jim Nantz, for those who've never met him, is like a really, really, really nice guy. And just amazing. Like he'll just come up to you and say hello, even if you've only met once, which is kind of what happened with us. But yeah, I think it was on that Friday. Again, this is 2 years ago, but on that Friday, Jim Nantz agreed to take a picture with you, which I believe is still your Facebook profile picture.
It's on my Twitter. It's on my Twitter, too.
Yeah, and Twitter, yeah.
Yeah.
And Twitter. And, the photo was taken by me. But I think that it was amazing with the next day. It was a Saturday. UCF had been eliminated. But, that's really all I talked to Jim Nantz for maybe 5 seconds and taking the picture, and then he went about his way. The next day, before the game starts, Jim Nantz comes out, pats me on the back, says hello, shakes my hand, says, how you doing? Like, it's really cool. And I know it's weird that we geek out because we're in the same business as he is in. We're all media members, but like he is a legend. He is an absolute legend in this business. And just for him to reach out like that and just be so nice, it's just a good feeling. Yeah,
it was awesome to see him do the game. And as we'll get into, I thought he was fantastic towards UCF through the 2 games and probably the biggest name broadcaster to call any UCF sporting event. I remember we discussed that over the media dinner area, who was the biggest broadcaster to ever call a UCF game at the time. We were discussing that, and little did we know, obviously, moving forward, Chris Fowler and Kurt Herbstreit would call a UCF football game against Cincinnati. I think that's right up there. Mike Tirico used to call the UCF game against South Carolina in 2005 when it was a Thursday night football game. I think we had come up with that. Sean McDonough had called UCF's Fiesta Bowl win in 2014. But I still maintain, I think Nance is probably the biggest broadcasting name that's called the UCF sporting event to date.
Yeah, and I'll say this: it's amazing. We got fortunate, we got lucky. But Nance and Hill and Raftery and Wolfson are there for one reason, and that's Duke. And so we got lucky being put in Duke's region.
Yes.
And if UCF is put in the 8-9 game with any other one seed on the other side, they're not there. Or if Duke's facing another 9 seed that's not UCF, it doesn't matter because they're still going to be there. It's Duke. That's one of, as much as I think I feared this matchup going in because I didn't want to see UCF get slaughtered by one of the most talented teams we've ever seen in college basketball, having that stage and having Duke and facing Duke allowed you to get more eyeballs on your program, get the best broadcasting crew on your program, a fantastic time slot on Sunday afternoon, early evening. It allowed UCF to get so much more national recognition, and that itself was fantastic. And then obviously they played, they in times outplayed the best team in the nation.
Going into the game, did you think they had a shot to pull the upset or not? I did not. I was naive. I was cynical. I'm like, well, boy, this could be a 10 to 20 point game. Interestingly, I got to give credit to Michael Donnell, who me and Jeff did a podcast with him. I want to say it was literally the day of the game. It might have been the night before. I don't remember, but we did a special podcast with him.
Yeah,
and
it was the day before. Remember that? I remember listening to that.
Okay, so it was the day before, and he broke down. He was confident UCF had a great shot, and it wasn't because, hey, I'm a UCF guy. He broke down the X's and O's and why he thought UCF would match up well with Duke, and most of it came true, as we would find out as the game would go on. But I got to give credit to Mike because he was on the forefront on that. I was not a believer going in. Were you a believer?
No, probably not. Just because I didn't see how, with the athleticism they had, and you look at when Duke plays well, they pick up the pace. And UCF had really struggled against teams that play with pace, like they did with Memphis. And so I just felt like, and then now you've got this is not just Memphis pace. This is the pace with, otherworldly talent and the likely two top picks in the upcoming NBA draft, not to mention Cam Reddish and Trey Jones. So all of that together, I just felt like it's probably going to be a double-digit game. If they keep it in single, I think I said to myself, if they keep it in single digits, I'll be happy. I believe the spread was 13.5. I thought if UCF had a chance, they needed to. I mean, really, and this is not me saying like, well, I told you so, but they needed to have a big game from Aubrey Dawkins, just as a shooter, a driver, a creator. And I thought one thing that maybe is overlooked, and maybe something it's not seen as a huge deal, but I think I'll mention it now. Aubrey was hurt at the end of the regular season. Remember, he played very limited minutes in the win against Cincinnati on senior night because he had a back injury. Then they go to Temple a couple days later. And like you said, Eric, he lit them up for 30-something points. And I asked him after that game, because he was questionable to play in that game. I asked him afterwards if that means his back is feeling better and if he's close to 100%. And he basically, his whole answer was no. So I feel like from that,
pretty short and to the point.
Yes. So from that, and then you had 5 days from Memphis, and then they get run on the building by Memphis. I do wonder if only playing one game in the span of almost 2 weeks really kind of helped Aubrey get healthy. If they go on a longer run in the conference tournament, is he less effective in the NCAA tournament? Because I think that was something there that I was really watching for going into this NCAA tournament. So they need a big game from him. And I'd say they got a pretty big game.
I think I remember we did a show after the Memphis game. It was probably selection night. And I said might not be the worst, or maybe it was leading up to the Memphis game. I said might not be the worst thing in the world if you lose early in the conference tournament.
Yeah.
Because there have been teams that go make a big run and then run out of gas in the tournament. But, all right, we're going to take another break. And when we come back, we're going to get into the game now. We're going to talk about the first half. and a very random play that may have impacted one of the more bigger plays later in the game that people still talk about to this day. What play that was? We'll tell you about that all next. You're listening to the Black and Gold Banneret as we go to UCF Rewind, back to the UCF men's basketball March to Madness. And welcome back to this special edition of the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast, UCF Rewind, as we rewind back to the UCF men's basketball March to Madness. A year ago, Eric Lopez alongside Brian Murphy. And Murph, let's finally get into it. All right, I know some of this is going to be a little painful for some of our audience, but let's just kind of take it for, let's just appreciate it for what it is. It's still sports, it's event. And I think there's so many stories within the game that we're going to get into that I don't know if many of you that have watched the game live or haven't watched it since may not even be aware of, Murph. And I think that's one of the things we're looking forward to as we get into this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I understand that this may not end the way people would like, and that people may not have emotionally come to terms with what happens. But as I've said numerous times, and as we voted on the website as our game of the year for 2019, this game is so fun to watch from front to back. It is absolutely a joy.
Right from the opening tip, because I don't remember a jump ball with as much hype as this one. You have Tacko and Zion ready to tip it off. You got Jim Nance with that stat, and you know where he got it from. He got it from Dan Forcella probably, right? UCF men's basketball. Tacko's won 32 straight tips. Never lost a tip. And you got Zion.
Tacko Fall, who has won his last 32 tips to start a game. Stepping in there is Zion for Duke. And let's get this second round game started. Columbia, South Carolina.
Zion's going to try.
All right, 33 unanswered. It was close.
That's our partner's number, 33.
I don't know how it was in the building, Murph. You were sitting in the building. I was in the obviously watching on TV, but even on TV, I could sense in the building there was an anticipation even for the jump ball.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No, the crowd was swelling to that. They understood, like, oh, they're going to match up right away. Here we go. And the players knew it, too. You could see, Zion getting ready to pounce, crouching down, Tacko looking to really take up all the airspace in the middle of the floor, and the referee trying to make sure they understand where they're supposed to stand. And it was kind of an ugly tip. It was a very ugly tip. Both guys went up. Both guys missed it. And then Tacko, because he's just longer, tips it out to Terrell Allen, and we're underway.
I thought the ref I might have been nervous, right? I mean, that's kind of a nervous tip. You're seeing a 7'6" guy, a Zion who could jump. I mean, it's kind of an intimidating tip if you're the ref, isn't it, to just throw the ball up?
Yeah, I think he just – I don't know if it's a nervous tip for him, but I think he knew that both players were anxious for this tip. They both knew – they both were very well aware of each other. They knew that everyone was talking about this one-on-one matchup. I remember Tacko the day before saying he didn't want this to turn into a freak show, but everyone was watching this matchup. They knew there were people watching this matchup, and so you could sense that anticipation and the way they went after the ball. You could sense they both wanted it, and UCF got the first possession. So, no, UCF did not lose a single tip-off last season.
And Tacko was active early, and they mentioned that. And you could just tell in the broadcast, too. Like, Bill Raftery just loves Tacko. Like, anytime – like, Bill is like, Tacko this, Tacko that. They were pushing it big time. But he was active early. He was aggressive early and was a factor early. And Duke knew right away they were going to have a handful with him because I thought he was so active early offensively, posting up, attacking the basket defensively. He did commit his first foul in the 15:08 mark on a reach-in foul, ironically guarding around Zion. But he was aggressive, and I thought set the tone for UCF early.
No, absolutely. I mean, the first play of the game, it's a he gets the ball, he rebounds the ball and gets a putback. And it gets a putback dunk, and you see Tacko, after the putback dunk, just flex his arms, yell out into the air, screaming into the air. You really don't see that kind of emotion from Tacko, especially 30 seconds into a game. But man, he was ready for this moment, and he did. He definitely was a force early on, but he was a force all night long, as we'll get into. And yes, Bill Raftery made like 3 Tacko food jokes within like the first 2 minutes. So he got that out of the way quickly.
What was the crowd in the building like? Was it a how many Duke fans compared to how many UCF fans? And then it's kind of tricky to analyze this for an NCAA tournament settings because you have fans from the other teams, usually teams that have played earlier. And then you have that fan base that might just jump on the underdog no matter what, right? So give me an idea on the fan base that it was in the building and also the media around you. How big of the media turnout was it?
Well, the media turnout was huge. I mean, there's people sitting on the court side, behind the tables, behind the announce table, behind the scorers table. There's about 2 rows there of media. And then in the rafters, kind of where I am, there's about 4 or 5 more rows of media. And so it's a huge presence, obviously. It's a national game with the best team in the nation and one of the biggest attractions in the nation, Tacko Fall. The crowd, it was a Duke partisan crowd only because they had a bigger allotment there early. And the crowd was kind of muted, I would say, early on, only because the Virginia fans and the Oklahoma fans had yet to arrive. They were going to tip off later that night. So those fans had really yet to show up. You can see it on the broadcast. Virginia's crowd section is behind UCF's bench. That section is rather empty for the first half of the game. So the crowd wasn't at full throat till later on. And I think early it was really a Duke partisan crowd because they had more fans there.
Early in the game, you could tell Aubrey was ready. He was flying around the court, was getting some shots, was going in. And you could just tell he was playing with confidence. And then on the contrast, B.J. Taylor struggled, got off to a slow start, took some tough shots. Let me ask you this, because I feel like at times we discussed that during the season. It felt like a lot of times, and full disclosure about this, I play this game with our good friend Trace Tacko. Hello, Trace. We play this game for fun, where we pick out who's going to be the highest scoring players on UCF. And we pick two UCF players just for fun. And I remember him and it always would be Aubrey and BJ, or BJ and Aubrey would be the first 2 picks for the most part. Occasionally one of us would surprise the other and go with Tacko as the first pick. But what was fascinating, and one of the cool things I enjoyed about playing that game is you kind of sense certain guys when how they were playing it. And one thing that was struck at me, very rarely did BJ and Aubrey both win off. It usually felt like, and I could be wrong, you could correct me if I'm wrong in this, but it felt like the majority of the time, if one of them went off, the other one would not. Did you feel that way? And I kind of got the sense here early, oh boy, Aubrey's in for a big night, but is BJ going to be able to get going?
Aubrey is very pragmatic about this. I mean, Aubrey will never tell you that, shooters get hot and that I was feeling it or any sort of that sort of stuff. Aubrey will just tell you that, sometimes you make shots, sometimes you miss shots, and it's a boring answer, but it's probably the right answer of, look, we both know they're good shooters, but on this day, for whatever reason, call it skill, call it some luck, Aubrey shots were falling. And in Aubrey shots, some of them were terrible shots. Some of them were really well-defended shots, coming off of really hard screens, fallaways from 25 feet. I mean, really difficult shots, and they're going in. And so they look good because of the result. Conversely, I thought BJ, especially early in the game, I think BJ was a little nervous, pressing a little bit. And I don't say that because of just he missed shots. He took some shots that really are just not his game. This sort of hero ball stuff, 3-pointers from deep, really well guarded stuff over. Like he shot one ball, I believe, over Marquise Bolden, a forward that had no chance. But I think he forced the action when he had the ball a little too much too early. I think everyone else kind of settled in. BJ took him a while, and I think that's why he struggled.
Yeah, but Aubrey was off to a great start, and then really was scoring early and keeping UCF in it. And then Zion Williamson rolled his ankle early in this first half. And it's funny, we kind of forget about that now. But, you mentioned it earlier. He had a similar situation in the North Carolina regular season game where his shoe blew up because he rolled his ankle. And they checked on him. He kind of stepped out and came back. It wasn't serious, but a couple times early in this first half, he rolled his ankle, and you wondered, oh, boy, is he going to be able to stay healthy? And he got off. I think that impacted because he was off to a bit of a slow start by his standards in the first half of the game here.
Yeah, and I'll say this. So I remember the Zion slip happened at the 14:22 mark.
Yeah.
2 minutes before that, we had our first real Tacko-Zion showdown moment in which Zion went up and Tacko straight up stonewalled him. And you can hear Raftery just shout one zip to Tacko. And so that was really the first moment. And we saw Tacko win that battle. And then, yes, 2 minutes later, Zion was kind of backing down a little bit on Chad Brown and went to pivot, and his left foot turned a little bit. He lost the ball, and I remember seeing him. I did not remember the layup by Aubrey Dawkins at the end of that play. I did not see that layup because I was too busy looking at Zion, because Zion was on the floor for a good 5-7 seconds trying to flex that ankle and trying to walk it off. And yes, the broadcast team kind of picked it up and they looked at it when they came back from the next break. But you could see that he was noticeably limping early on.
10:56 mark of the first half. Tacko gets his second foul reaching on a loose ball after his shot was blocked. As we'll get into it, obviously he gets into some foul trouble. He gets pulled from the game at this time. And we're going to focus on some fouls that were controversial, questionable. But these are the fouls, Murph, boy, that just – those are the ones you got to stay away from, because there's going to be some 50-50 ones that may not go your way later that you're going to be upset about. But if you don't commit a foul like this so early, then it's not as big of a deal later on. And I just thought that was his second foul, and Coach Dawkins took him out of the game. Duke goes on a 10-4 run. But I thought a play that was interesting during this run. UCF forced a turnover. They're running a break. Dayon Griffin, at the 8:56 mark, Murph, throws a lob to Chad Brown, and it was executed perfectly for a dunk. Dayon Griffin.
First of all, can we run through that entire play?
Sure.
That play's kind of nuts. That play is stupid, crazy, because for some reason – there had been some sort of water on the floor at that corner.
Yes,
it was in the very near corner next to UCF's bench. Terrell Allen was kind of getting trapped in that corner, falls, slips, and is trying to find a way to bail out the ball. And one of the reasons why he's able to pass the ball out, is because Zion, who's coming over to double him on the ground, also slips. So Zion slips. Terrell Allen's on the ground. Terrell Allen feeds it to Aubrey, who feeds it to Dayon, who goes up, and it's a great pass to Chad for a very authoritative slam, very much of the Chad Brown brand. And so then it was great. It was a great play. But the fact that it actually happened is kind of nuts, just the way the whole thing sort of went down.
And the fact that Dayon Griffin throws that lob pass, I want everybody who's listening to mark that down, 8:56, because this won't be the last time we mention a Dayon Griffin lob pass. Okay, so I want to we're going to mention that later on, but I want people to highlight that play. I mentioned Duke went on a 10-4 run, Murph. Coach Dawkins brings back Tacko in with 7:45 to go in the first half with 2 fouls. Were you surprised when it happened?
Yeah, a little bit, but you understood it, right? You understood why. We've seen Coach Dawkins, and I don't love this, and he does it a lot, and he probably shouldn't do it as much as he does, but he has a tendency to, once his guy, especially a forward or center, once they pick up his second foul, they're done for the half. And even Jim Nantz mentioned on the broadcast, we didn't think we'd see Tacko Fall again this half, yet he brings Fall back in just a few minutes later because this game at this point is slipping away. Duke is getting what they want down low against the likes of Chad Brown and Colin Smith. They got to put Tacko back out there. And so, yes, it's a risk, but it's definitely a risk worth taking, because if they don't put him back out there and they let him wait on the bench with 2 fouls and not come back until halftime, who knows what the score is at that point.
He takes him out with 4:56 to go. In fast forwarding it to later in the first half, 2:20 mark. Game's tied 34. The one and only time that we hear a Central Florida reference by Jim Nantz. That's his only time in the entire broadcast that Jim Nantz mentioned Central Florida. And he quickly corrected him. He went to UCF. So clearly he listened. He read Dan's notes. He was not going to refer to Central Florida. I think Grant Hill may have done it 1 or 2 times. Greg Gumbel, if anybody watched the pregame, referred to UCF as UFC. But that was the only time that Jim Nantz referenced Central Florida in that game. I think he referenced it early in the VCU game, but mentioned how they're from the University of Central Florida, and then referenced. He was very stable and mentioned UCF a lot, which I know sometimes, unfortunately, it is a part of the storyline with fans and how their UCF's referenced during a broadcast and do they like them or not. Jim, I thought they were very UCF throughout for the most part, like 99.5%.
Jim obviously read the game notes. There's no doubt about that.
That's correct. I remember, I think Dan Forcella may have even posted a photo of Jim Nantz reading his notes while Dan's there watching or something. I don't remember. It was pretty funny on social media. 34-34, to a big point in this game. Duke decides to go zone press here, Murph, and UCF has trouble with it. Gets sloppy with the ball, turns it over. Duke goes on a run. They go on an 8-0 run. They would go into the locker room up 8, 44-36, and a big part of that was that zone press that Duke kind of sprung on UCF, and UCF clearly struggled with it. UCF ended up turning the ball over 8 times in the first half. 6 of them, though, were live ball turnovers, and what that means is they're turnovers that you could continue to play. A dead ball turnover is when it goes out of bounds and, hey, nothing happens. That converted into 11 fast break points for Duke, and a majority of that happened in the last 2 minutes of the game where Duke goes up 8. And I remember at halftime, Charles Barkley said, very interestingly, that if UCF goes on to lose this game, they will regret the last 2+ minutes of the first half when Duke went on that run. They go up 8.
You hear coaches all the time talking about the last 5 minutes before halftime, the first 5 minutes after halftime, the most important minutes of the game. This was a tie game, and UCF had 2 turnovers. They got them out on a fast break, and now you're down 8. If they lose this game, they're going to regret the last 2 or 3 minutes right before the half, because this was a tie game. Now you're down 8. Now your back is against the wall.
What do you remember about that sequence in that last 2 minutes in that zone press?
Well, I think okay, so a few things, and I'll try to be quick with it because there's a lot I want to talk about in this stretch.
Yeah.
One, I was just waiting for Duke at some point to take over, right? Like, I understand, like, we actually saw North Dakota State hang with them for a good portion of the first half. We've seen dominant teams kind of struggle with clear underdogs in the tournament for stretches, but I was waiting for Duke to put together that run that makes us remember why they are the best team in the country. And part of it is because their defense is phenomenal and it leads to a lot of easy buckets. And again, all of this is, again, without Tacko on the floor because he's got his 2 fouls. That certainly hurts. But I wasn't looking at this stretch as like, well, UCF's going to regret this. This was something that I thought was going to happen at some point. We knew that at some point Duke is going to explode and go off on this run. I was more thinking about how does UCF counter back from this. Now, I didn't know what happened. I didn't know it would happen at the end of the half. And obviously you have to go into the locker room and wait 20 minutes. And that's different than just calling a timeout and sort of setting up a new offense. So it was going to be really interesting. I know at that point at halftime, I was thinking that, well, Duke could really come out of the second half and hit a couple baskets and kind of put their foot on UCF's throat. And you know, we'll get into that. I want to bring up, and it's something that no one really mentions. I know it's a Duke thing, but no one really mentions it. Jordan Goldwire was phenomenal in the last couple of minutes because, one, when UCF could not get anybody into the middle of their press to sort of release the pressure, Goldwire was getting his hands on so many balls, tipping passes, stealing passes, leading the easy baskets on the other end. He's someone that's not mentioned on this team because of the star power of Duke. He was really, I thought, the guy that got this game turned around in Duke's favor and got them up by 8.5.
Duke up 44-36 in the first half. Zion Williamson, 50. Remember we said, he's off to a slow start. Boy, he finished strong in that half. Ended up 15 points, 4 boards, a couple assists, including that bounce pass, Murph. Do you remember that bounce pass on a fast break? And that was the thing during this stretch. You're turning the ball over. The Duke's speeding up the game. And then Zion, you could just see his court vision. There was that bounce pass that he made that just the broadcaster was like in awe. And you're like, wow, what a bounce pass. Perfectly for a fast break for a basket. And I agree with you. At that point, I felt, oh, boy, this is the big punch here. It's kind of like that boxer at the end of a round. It's like they're throwing the big punch here. Can you stay on the ropes and avoid getting knocked out? You know, that was the big question here because this was the big punch that Duke was coming with, and it was with force, you know, with him. And really, by the way, this was the most points that UCF has given up in a first half all year.
And, you know, again with Tacko, when he went out of the game, I believe at the 4 something, it was like the 4:56 mark.
Yeah.
Right. So at that point, it's a 30-29 game. If you look at a lot of Duke's baskets late in that stretch, and this is a great paint points team. It's a fantastic paint points team. It was the best paint points team in the nation. But when you look at that last stretch, without Tacko on the floor, it's mostly all paint points or stuff that's coming out from like 7 feet, 8 feet out, just on the perimeter, just on the outside of the paint. Without Tacko in there, it changed everything offensively and defensively. And they had the stat at halftime about with Tacko off the floor, UCF was -9. With him on the floor, they were +1. Yes, Aubrey Dawkins was hitting some crazy shots, and he had 18 points at the half. But Tacko Fall was the reason why UCF was either succeeding or failing.
UCF did not make a field goal the last 5 minutes of that first half, Murph. All their points came from the free throw line at that stretch. What happened with the offense there? And I think the other thing, too, you mentioned without Tacko, Chad Brown, we love Chad Brown and Colin Smith, and I don't know if we ever discussed it with either of them, but and they're not the only ones in this. This is not their fault, but clearly they were up against it when they were being guarding Zion. I mean, that was tough because you could sense that's why Zion was so aggressive inside at that point in the game, because those two guys, it didn't matter who was covering Zion, they just had no chance.
No, absolutely, and certainly the turnovers hurt. There was a bad shot by Frank Burks, which it's fine. I know Frank's a shooter, but it's not really the time at that point for a bad shot there. With I think about a minute 40 left to go in the first half. It was just a drought. I wouldn't really put anything on it other than teams go through droughts. Duke went through a drought in this game as well, and teams make runs. This was Duke's run. I disagree with the Barkley sentiment that UCF would regret these 2 minutes, 3 minutes, because we've been waiting for this. This was inevitable. This kind of run where Duke makes you play their game and overwhelms you with their athleticism, that was coming. We just hadn't seen it yet, and now we saw it, and now it's UCF's turn to answer.
Duke, something that was interesting, Duke went 5 for 11 from the three-point line in the first half, and that was significant because coming into the game, Duke was ranked 339th in the country in three-point shooting, which is really bad. And they even mentioned it on the broadcast. No team, and this is funny because this now stays true, no team that was that bad shooting the three-point line had ever made it to the Final Four, which, ironically, that still came out to be true. But Duke was hitting threes, and that had to be frustrating for Coach Dawkins, right? Because I'm sure that was, as we know, and we'll see more about it in the second half, that was a big part of the game plan, and everybody was doing it. Keep Duke on the perimeter. Make him shoot too. But Zion made a couple threes. Trey made a three. That had to be frustrating, too, from a UCF standpoint, is you're letting them hit these threes. They don't normally make them, and yet they're making them at a 5 for 11 clip in the first half. Was it discouraging, or did you feel like maybe the numbers will even out in the second half, and maybe that's why you thought, you know what, Barkley's wrong on this? You didn't know that Barkley said it at the time, but you thought maybe they were still going to be okay despite being down 8 at the half.
UCF has to tip their hat to Duke at that point because, again, this team is so overwhelming with their points in the paint because of their physicality and their size, athleticism, that you want to make them shoot threes. Again, no power conference team shot worse from three-point range than Duke last season. So the game plan was smart, and so they come out and hit 5 for 11. What are you going to do? I mean, you're making them play your game. If they're going to hit shots, they're going to hit shots. I thought Cam Reddish, who had a really up and down year and struggled of late going into that game, was huge for Duke's offense at that point. 2 of 3 from deep, 4 of 6 from the field. He was a big part of what they did. Obviously, people focus on Zion, but Cam Reddish, I thought, was probably the most important player for Duke, certainly offensively in that first half.
So Duke goes into the locker room with a 44-36 lead at the half, and I think we all knew that first few minutes of the second half would tell the story. Can UCF bounce back, make this a game, or was Duke going to pull away? Coming up, we'll go into the second half. And boy, if you thought we've had a lot to talk about so far, wait till the second half. A lot to cover, including some of the more memorable plays and controversial plays. We'll dissect it all coming up next. You're listening to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast, UCF Rewind, back at the UCF March Madness Run. And welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast, special edition UCF Rewind, where we look back at some of the UCF games, new headlines and moments from past years. We look back at the UCF March to Madness here, and we're, of course, breaking down the UCF Duke game. I'm Eric Lopez alongside Brian Murphy, who was there. on this game. So we're now going to start the second half, Murph, 44-36. Give me what was going through your mind here right before tip-off here to start the second half.
Well, at this point, I'm thinking that UCF has about a 2-3 minute stretch here where if they don't do much of anything, they're going to get run out of the building by this team. And I was fearful of going into that half that Duke had found something with their press and that they were going to just really overwhelm UCF, and that UCF needed to respond.
And respond they did. They came out with a 7-0 run to start the second half, highlighted by Colin Smith, something we get used to the following year, taking a charge on Cam Reddish at the 18:39 mark, Murph. That would be Cam Reddish's third foul. Little did we know we would see more of Colin Smith charges down the road in the year to come. But UCF responded big time with that 7-0 run. I thought that was big because it showed that they were going to be, hey, we're not going to go down quietly here. They fought back to get back in this game. And really you would see both teams alternating runs here early in the second half.
No, absolutely. And again, it's Tacko Fall. It's lovely that Colin drew that charge. But for me, the reason why UCF cut this game from 44-36 to 44-43 in less than 3 minutes is, again, Tacko Fall just being dominant down low. They have no matchup for him. There was an alley-oop lob from Terrell Allen that started it. Then they had a Aubrey Dawkins coming off a screen for a really well-contested three-pointer that, of course, he made because this was Aubrey Dawkins. That was the kind of day he had. And then another dunk from Tacko, and Duke had to call a timeout. Tacko was just too much on that end of the floor for Duke to stop. And all of a sudden, with again less than 3 minutes gone in the second half, UCF had cut the lead down to 1.
Coming back out of immediate timeout, CBS shows Tacko Fall Senior Day highlight, right, with his mom. They talk about the story. First time he's seen the mom, seen him play in person. I mean, give me your thoughts, because you were there in person, but you got to see the telecast. Your thoughts? The CBS took care of Tacko and then some, right? I mean, we talk about making a start, but it was pretty amazing how well they just put. I will use a wrestling term here, right? Because you can't do a Banneret podcast without me doing a wrestling term here. They put Tacko Fall over big time, right? Nobody can complain. No UCF fan can complain that they didn't get a fair shake on the broadcast.
No, absolutely, and certainly that was one thing they wanted to do, but they didn't do it in a disrespectful or short-sighted sort of way where it's like, hey, he's tall, look at him. It's like, no, he's really talented. Look how well he's playing against Duke, and plus, there's a tremendous story to all of this. He's a tremendous person. The story, obviously, what happened with his mother and brother coming to see him for Senior Day was a national story, and that's where I thought really with Tacko. To that point, Tacko had sort of been, this really tall guy and sort of a sideshow. And then you saw that the last season where he was playing well, and it was kind of like a fun thing to watch. But then that story developed, and you understood about Tacko Fall's background and what he left when he left Senegal 7 years earlier. And now that coming, together with his mother and brother again, that national story, I think, opened a lot of eyes to who Tacko Fall is. A person whom they had seen as just a tall guy in a basketball court to now understanding the kind of person he was. I think that helped his national recognition going into this tournament even before it began.
Tacko would pick up his third foul of the game at the 17:08 mark. And there was a question, even the broadcast crew brought it up, on the foul on Zion. Was it on Tacko or was it on Colin? Because they both made contact with Zion. I think the crew was split. I think they thought maybe Colin was the one that initiated the foul. There wasn't a lot of contact, but they were caught off guard. What did you think of that play there? Should that have been a foul on Tacko, or do you think that was a foul on Colin?
I think that was a foul. I mean, I understand that Colin sort of hip checks him with his left hip a little bit, but I thought the initial contact was created by Tacko. And I will say this: there were points in this game, and there's one point in the first half I won't go back to it, but there are points in this game where another foul could have been called on Tacko against Zion, and they didn't call it. So we can nitpick things, but there's also another side of the story in that Tacko got some fortunate non-calls as well.
Well, especially since you brought it up, the 12-minute mark, Zion drives on Tacko. It looked like Tacko created more contact. It was definitely hit him. and the crew even made a great point. There was more contact on that play than there was on the play that Tacko was called for his third foul, but they was a no call on that.
This defense right now is causing some confusion.
No call. Oh. Zion tried to go in there and pick up the fourth on Tacko.
Mike is furious on the sideline, too.
Tacko said, "You're not going to dunk on me. We're not going to allow it to happen."
So in a way, it was kind of made up for the third foul. Maybe it kind of like it balanced itself out. And it was a tricky game for the refs to call in this game, right? I felt like, there was going to be a lot of contact and they were going to let some things go and some didn't. And it was just kind of a weirdness. We'll get into it later. There were some really interesting calls that you wondered. I wondered sometimes if the refs just kind of lost control where they were at in the moment. Maybe the moment sometimes got too big for them or not, but it was a constant. And boy, the crew, they kept mentioning, Tacko, got to be careful. Got to be careful. They were worried about him. But this was during the run where Duke made the run, a 7-0 run. And Duke was still hitting threes at this point, Murph. They were now 6 of 13 at this point from the three-point line. They were up 51-43. Colin Smith, if you remember, makes the play off the dribble, draws the foul on Zion and hits it off the glass, which was an incredible finish to pull within 51-45. Unfortunately, he would miss his free throw. That was the first free throw UCF had missed at that point in the game to make it 51-45. But then we saw, at that point, UCF changed their defense where they really wanted to make sure that Duke, and in particular, Trey Jones, feel free to shoot from the three-point line, didn't we?
Absolutely. And look, you give UCF credit because they didn't let Duke take them out of their defensive game plan, even though Duke had hit shots. UCF knew what they wanted to do against this team. And if Duke was going to hit three-pointers, then, well, what are you going to do? You tip your cap and say, well done and good game, and you go forward. But UCF stuck to their plan of crowding the paint, making it really difficult for R.J. Barrett and Zion Williamson down low and forcing them to shoot threes. I love two moments. Well, there's one moment I love in the second half. It comes at the 11:45 mark. This is right out of the timeout, right before the timeout, where UCF is, I believe, down by one. And Jordan Goldwire has the ball, and he's got 10 feet from him and Terrell Allen. And Terrell Allen is just waving him to shoot it. I mean, he's daring him. He does not end up taking the shot. But that was what UCF was doing. UCF was just daring Duke to shoot, even though they had already hit a number of threes. There were points in the second half where Tacko was, quote-unquote, guarding Trey Jones because Tacko, in the paint, was the closest defender to Trey Jones because they knew that they'd be better off forcing Duke to shoot threes than getting anything close to the rim. I thought it was a tremendous game plan, and it was really awesome to see them stick with it.
And a game plan you would see other teams moving forward use it. And really, UCF, you could argue, provided the blueprint for Duke moving forward on that. So both teams exchanging runs. And then at the 10-20 mark, Murph, B.J. Taylor finally hits a three-pointer, gave UCF a 57-54 lead. And I'll be honest, at that moment, that was the moment, Murph, at that moment where I said, blank. UCF's got a shot in this game. This is going to go down to the wire. And then 3 seconds later, Zion responded with a three to tie it himself. But at that point, and you could sense the fans, I think at that point felt like in the building, like at least from watching it on TV, like, hey, we got a game here going. It's on. Where were you mindset-wise? Did you feel at that point UCF had a shot in this game? Were you still skeptical? Where were you at this point?
I wasn't there yet, only because I just kept thinking my entire way, really through through 36 minutes of this game. I kept thinking it doesn't matter, Duke's gonna make a run and they're gonna win this game easily. And so even though BJ hit that shot, which by the way, I didn't love the shot. The shot clock was running down, but it was just another really tough three for him, and a shot that he's missed multiple times earlier today. But it was a nice shot, good for him. But then to have Zion come back and tie it up, that basically killed, I think, any momentum that UCF thought they were going to gain from that. And so immediately I thought that it doesn't matter. Duke's going to come back. They're going to win it. They're going to hit shots even when you're not guarding them from deep. And no one guarded Zion on that three-pointer. no defender on that three-pointer from Zion who was above the three-point line. And so I just felt that Duke was still going to take over at that point, even though UCF had reclaimed a lead.
Tacko would pick up his fourth foul guarding Zion at the 9:34 mark of the game. Duke would go on a run to go up 64-59. We get a Jim Nance, by the way, Masters promo at the 9:52 mark of this game, which is always great, man. That's part of the tradition. The two things we're used to with Nance in the tournament is that Masters promo and then 60 minutes. And you could tell even the way he was reading the promo, like either Raftery or Hill, somebody was teasing him about it, right? Like, oh, Jim Nance with the Masters promo. So it's 64-59 at the 7:38 mark. Chad Brown grabs a rebound off a UCF miss and draws a foul from Zion. He goes up, he gets fouled by Zion. We go to immediate timeout. You're thinking, now I didn't think about this at all live. So he goes to the line, we come back from break, and you can hear Jim Nance, Chad Brown going for two shots.
Brown to shoot two. Well, I guess the total 1-1, not an active shooting. Okay.
He shoots the first. He misses. Duke grabs the rebound. We're moving. And Nance, you could tell in Nance's tone, like, well, I guess it's a one shot. And I can tell you, as somebody who's been a spotter for a play-by-play guy and a statistician, that is a bad feeling. I was thinking at that moment, and it's weird. I was thinking at that moment. I wasn't thinking about what was going on. I was thinking, oh, boy. Did the stats guy, did the spotter screw up Nance here? I'm like, is Nance like staring at him right now? Like, what the hell is going on? But it wasn't until I watched it later, and actually Mark Daniels, obviously the radio voice of UCF, brought this up on the radio locally. I think it was the day or two after, and he brought this play up because he wrote it down in his notebook. Hey, two-shot foul, and it was only one shot. We never got an explanation. You were in the building. Did you, at the time when this happened, did you notice this? Were you not aware of this until afterwards?
No, I didn't sense it in the moment, and like you, I didn't really hear about it till later. And so I'm watching this. I've watched this numerous times, like the Zapruder film, of like what happened here. And I think there's I don't want to say that there might have been a mix. There probably was a mix-up. Just because the referee, the baseline referee, makes a call and points one in the sky. Now, Zion's named number one, but he's pointing at the hoop as if to say he's going up.
Right.
However, if you go back and look at it, it's a really, really late whistle because once Chad gets the rebound, goes up, and it looks like he gets kind of rejected by Zion, there's a little bit there's a very short skirmish for the ball, and then you hear the whistle. It's a very late whistle. So I believe, although there might have been a mix-up, the ultimate call was that the foul came from Zion reaching and kind of slapping Chad Brown on his left arm. I believe that's what the call ended up being. But that, again, I don't know that for sure. It's kind of just my interpretation of watching the play over and over again. And I feel bad for Nance because you heard him say, like, Chad Brown for two, or Chad Brown will shoot two, and then he misses the first and goes, oh, I guess it's only a 1-on-1, no shooting foul.
And the weird thing from a broadcast standpoint, usually you look at the ref, and the ref usually puts up either one or two shots. And as a spotter, that's your job. You got to let him know, hey, he put one or two. But I don't know. I don't know if the ref did a good job explaining, hey, is this a one shot or a two shot? Everybody was confused by this, clearly. I mean, if the broadcasters are confused by it, I can only imagine everybody else there were people there that might have been confused within the court. And I'm sure the UCF bench was probably confused and outraged as well.
Yeah, and I didn't see any reaction from the bench looking at it again here. I didn't see any reaction from the bench once they missed that free throw. So I think someone told them, but we just didn't know. And maybe they said that, there was not a shooting foul, but a loose ball foul while they're going for the free throw, while they're going for the ball, that Zion hits Chad Brown, and that was the foul.
So and keep in mind, this is not like college basketball. It's not like the NBA. In the NBA, they allow continuation. College basketball, it doesn't. In a play like this, maybe they did get it right, but people just assume, wait a minute, you fouled him on the way up, but the shot wasn't up yet. They still could have explained it better. And we never got a full explanation on the broadcast. They kind of let it go. No, there was they never went back to it. And I remember.
all we got was Nance saying, "Oh, I guess it's a 1-on-1," and then dead silence for about 5 seconds.
Yeah, I guarantee you, he's staring at the spotter like, he's probably putting his hands up like, "What's going on here?" And the spotter guy, poor guy, he's like, "Oh, I don't know." But that was kind of a weird deal, and that's why. And that's probably the first time. I don't, what's interesting, I remember on social media, there weren't a lot of UCF fans even bringing that up. I think part of the reason was there was a lengthy media timeout, right, because of commercials. So you almost kind of forgot what happened unless you watched it later or rewinded it. And I wonder, had there been a foul and there was no media timeout, would have been a lot clearer to understand. I don't know. But it's almost like everybody just forgot. And, it made it look like, hey, because sometimes this has happened in basketball where if you're a guy at the free throw line and you just go for the rebound, sometimes you could fool the ref into thinking it was just one shot. That was kind of my thought, like, oh, my God, did they just fool the ref into a one-shot deal? But nobody stopped it. I have to believe that maybe you're right. Maybe that's what it was. They just assume. But even the players, the way they reacted, they weren't 100% sure, Murph.
I think Duke reacted pretty strongly to the board. I think they got the call. I think the call was clear on the court during the timeout, but it was made not clear to anyone else watching the game.
So that's very interesting. And I've never heard your theory, by the way. No one has ever brought up your breakdown of that play. So I think that was very interesting there. Now, Duke was up 64-59. They played basketball. But UCF then goes on a run. And Dayon Griffin hits a three, Murph, at the 5:03 mark to make it 68-67 at that point. It was 68-67 Duke at that point. But I remember Griffin was fired up at that point, and the bench was fired up after that three. So UCF responded, even with all that and Duke's run, they responded again.
Well, we have to even go back a little further than that. We have to go back, I believe, to around the 6:30 mark, where Tacko Fall re-enters the game with his fourth foul. Again, I know Tacko doesn't have a huge deal to do with three-pointers, but again, he's on the court, and all of a sudden UCF's offense gets going again. But Johnny had no choice. Johnny was down. They were down by 7 with less than 7 to play. You had to put him back out there to see what you could do. And then UCF, over the next couple minutes, puts up some really I know I've been kind of picking on three-pointers in this game, and I shouldn't, but just the three-pointers they shot in this stretch it was unbelievable that these shots went down. The first one was by Aubrey, which I get because he was so hot that he had to shoot it. He was wide open.
Dawkins, how about that attack? He's been hot all game long. Got 28, 5 out of 7 from 3. First basket by the Knights in almost 4 minutes.
They pushed the ball up the court. He made it. And the reason why he shot it is because he's 9 of 13 at that point, and he's hot. But it was 22 seconds to go on the shot clock. That cut the lead down to 2, or down to 4. Excuse me. Then Aubrey again, free throw line jumper, pretty play to break, get in the middle of the Duke zone and get a jumper, and to cut the lead down to 2. And then Dayon Griffin. Eric, I remember saying to myself during that shot, again, this was not a good possession. This was a one pass possession. This was, by the way, going into that, you had Tacko and Zion fighting at the rim. Tacko blocked Zion, did not get called for his fifth foul there, but then Zion got the ball back and laid it in because Tacko had to be careful. But the Knights come back down by 4, and it's an awful possession. It's one pass it's 2 passes from Terrell Allen to BJ Taylor back to Dayon Griffin with 20 seconds on the shot clock. A guy who has not made anything all day shoots a 3 and it goes down. And Bill Raftery screams out, "He's a shooter," which yes, he's a shooter. But oh my God, why are you taking that shot? I swear to God, at the moment that shot left, I went, no, yes. It was one of those times where you just like, it's an awful shot. Why are you doing that? Oh my God, it went down. And then you can say what happened next. What happens next is probably my favorite moment of this game.
Well, by the way, don't forget, but prior to that, Duke had tried to do a little. I'm watching it again right now. I just put it on again as we're recording this.
Me too. Yeah. Me too.
Why not? I recommend. But remember, Duke tried to do a little zone press again, when it was 66-59. They had been on a 12-2 run. Remember, I think they left Duke open 3 that was missed. Well, it went out of bounds, as you mentioned. And then they went over the top, and then Aubrey just let it go and drilled it.
Right. Oh, yeah.
I mean,
it was an awful shot. Again, 23 seconds left in the shot clock. But again, he was open because they had forced the ball up the floor. They had broken the press. And I don't mind him, I guess, shooting it there because he'd been so hot. But, oh, my God, working your offense. Tacko's back on the floor. Work your offense. And UCF goes on this run where they do none of that. None of that.
No. And, again, Duke trying to press him. At 66-62 at the 6-minute mark. And remember, and Dawkins is drilling fadeaway. So we haven't even mentioned him yet in the second half. But, we talked off air. He had a great first half. And then, he was moving around and right above the free throw line, just a beautiful shot to make it within 2. And he was just getting open, and he was feeling it. And it was that point, I think he would argue with you, Merv, there was no such thing as a bad shot for him at that point.
Absolutely. No, I mean, like I said, it's not a great shot. But because he had been so on point, he had hit everything off of curls and screens, deep, falling away, guys in his face, didn't matter. He was nailing it. Now he was nailing 2-point jumpers as well. Getting in the middle of the zone, free throw line, shot, soft touch jumpers, doesn't matter, it's falling. So at that point, as much as you don't like it because it's not in the flow of the offense, you let him have that because he had just been so good. The Dayon Griffin 3, though, that blew my mind. That almost broke me.
Defensively.
Griffin down the 1. He's a 3-point shooter from deep.
Tell you what, Johnny Dawkins has his guys playing out here and competing against these Blue Devils.
It's a 1-point game, and again, now Duke, you could tell they're settling. Zion shoots a 3 from the top. He misses. Tacko gets the rebound. You could tell Duke's they don't know what they want to do half-court-wise. And UCF has kind of done a nice job quietly of slowing this game down, making it a half-court game, which they have to do in this game against Duke. And really UCF responding with a run of their own, and then B.J. Taylor shoots it right corner, drills the 3 to give them the lead, 70-68. Forcing Duke to call a timeout, Murph, at the 3:50 mark in the game. An incredible shot, and that building exploded. There was UCF fans, but I think there were also anti-Duke fans in that building at that point. I don't know if you believed it at that point, but everybody's like, "Oh wow, this could go down as an upset here."
Zion and Tacko, it's unbelievable. Here's Taylor, and it's UCF from downtown, and an 11-2 stretch. And Duke calls a timeout.
No, I believe it now because the building brought you into it. The building was full now because you had both the Oklahoma and Virginia fans waiting for their next game. So they're there in the arena now. The arena's full now, and that shot by BJ. First of all, it's a really nice shot for him to get open, kind of just slow playing it, working around a number of screens, basically leading RJ Barrett through the paint, back out of the paint. And it's a nice shot by him just to get open. He takes a very, very slight move to his left just to draw a couple more inches away from RJ Barrett, who was really guarding his right hand. And BJ hits a monster 3. That basket, that shot, and that moment going into the timeout because Coach K called a timeout at that moment. It's probably my favorite moment of the game. Just as a UCF fan, watching BJ's reaction on the replay, watching him scream, "Let's go!" Johnny Dawkins is clapping and shouting back toward his bench. You've got cheerleaders chest bumping each other. You've got Tacko pumping his fist. Terrell Allen's yelling for the crowd to get up because he knows the crowd's in their favor now. Aubrey Dawkins is screaming at B.J. Taylor. And now Duke is scrambling. That for me still gives me chills. It's the best moment for me as a fan.
At that moment, are you now like they could pull this off?
At this point now, I'm starting to get nervous. I really am getting very nervous, which is not good when you're supposed to be writing.
I was going to say, I think you even tweeted it out that you said you have never in your life remember being as intense and nervous about a game than you were at that moment.
No, the final 3 minutes were I was a wreck emotionally, and trying to write it was really difficult because again my hands were shaking. It wasn't just that shot, but the last 3 minutes, there was so much riding on it, not just winning a game, but who they would beat, what it would mean for the program, what it would mean for these seniors. All of that started flooding in, and now up by 2, less than 4 minutes to play. You got your leader hitting shots now. BJ's hit a couple of shots. He's kind of in the flow of the game now, and Tacko's unstoppable. Aubrey has been magnificent, and Duke needs to find an answer. And it's amazing that with 4 minutes to go, less than 4 minutes to go, Duke is the one needing to find an answer.
Well, when in doubt, go to Zion, who made a beautiful move to the basket. Left hand, avoided contact. Tacko just stayed up. He couldn't do anything. Beautiful play off the basket to tie the game up at 70. And Zion was just, I mean, the agility is just amazing. I mean, there's nothing you could do there if you're defensively, and he made the play there to tie that game up at that point, 70-70, kind of ended that UCF had gone to an 11-2 run at that moment. Now UCF hits the possession. As we get to mention the 3-minute mark, Aubrey just pulls up and drills it from the baseline with two guys on him, Murph.
He hadn't done that all game. He had been coming off of screens and curls and hitting deep threes or hitting stuff in the lane, layups, couple of alley-oops. By the way, he had an alley-oop from Dayon Griffin at the 11-15 mark that he made. And now he's going baseline all the way over 2 guys. It was just amazing to watch. He could not miss. What a day.
Made it 72-70 UCF. Now Duke is scrambling. We're under 3 minutes. They almost turned the ball over. Zion is being guarded by Aubrey, and the ref calls a charge on Zion, pushing off on Aubrey Dawkins for an offensive foul with 2:46 to go. Your reaction to that play call, was that the right call or not?
I thought at the time it looked like the good call, but like if you're watching it back, I remember watching this back as a fan when I got home from South Carolina, and watching this game again. I'm like, that's a cheap call. It's a really cheap call. Zion drives left because, of course, he's a lefty, and he does drive a little bit with his off arm into Aubrey, but it's very slight. Aubrey clearly draws it because he flies himself back about 5 feet on the floor. Even Raftery, I think, or even brought up how Aubrey sort of drew the foul because of his histrionics. It really wasn't that bad of a foul. It probably should not have been a call. Probably should have been a no call, but it was called a charge. The fact that was called a charge should mean something later on in this game.
Yeah, we'll get to that. So now UCF has the ball up 2 here, Murph. The shot clock's running, though. They really are stymied here. Not much going on offensively. BJ throws up a wild shot.
Taylor, the senior, with 3 to shoot. They call him Big Shot Barry. Off the floor, Dawkins blocked. Tacko with the dunk.
I think that
Knights take the 4-point lead.
Yeah, Jim, that might have been a shot clock violation.
They're going to check.
I don't think B.J. Taylor's shot hit the rim, but great presence of mind by Aubrey Dawkins on the play before as B.J. Taylor went up. I don't think the ball hit the rim on that shot.
It looked like it missed the rim. Could be shot clock violation. Aubrey goes up where it gets blocked. Right, the ball goes right to Tacko, who dunks the ball. And now you're like, wait a minute. Did the ball hit the rim? Did it not? Duke's arguing it didn't hit the rim. And they go to review the play with 2:09 to go in what was a huge play, a long replay that I think it took 5 minutes for them to figure it out. From where your vantage point, what do you recall from that play, watching it, and what was your reaction to it?
Well, I remember being like everyone else, looking at all the angles, and the first one that you really saw that said, well, that's not a basket, is the angle from the top of the backboard, looking down at the hoop, and that looks like the ball sails over the rim, including sailing over the neck of the rim, doesn't hit anything until it hits the backboard and then hits down. But then you look at other side angles from the floor, from the other courtside angle, and you just don't know. Somehow the ball seems to get right in between the ring of the hoop, the backboard, the neck of the rim, and at some point in there, does the ball at all graze the rim? You can't see the ball change direction. That makes it really difficult. But because of the call on the floor was to play on, and Gene Sarator, the ref, brought it up on the broadcast, indisputable visual evidence. You hear it all the time in the NFL. You had to see it here. And I don't know how any of this is indisputable. I would say if I'm just looking at it and I had to make a call, I'd say it did not hit the rim. But since the burden of proof, lies on whether or not it did hit the rim, and to say that it didn't and to change that call, I think that's too far to go. So I think the refs, in the end, made the correct decision because it wasn't indisputable. But, I mean, I look at that 20 times, and I would say, gun to my head, that it probably didn't hit the rim.
I didn't think it hit the rim either. And my thought was, oh, my God, they're going to reverse this, and everybody on social media is going to flip out, right? Like, oh, here we go. Duke's getting the benefit of the doubt. How weird was it to see Gene Steratore, by the way, who, you first think, wait, football? Oh, wait, no, basketball. Right. He did basketball. He did ref basketball. But that took forever. And I think they thought it was going to get reversed, and I remember I'm thinking, oh boy, they're going to change, and people are going to flip out. They didn't change it, and I remember the reaction on social media was almost like, oh, okay, all right, all right, let's move forward. There, and it was funny. I remember now watching it again. I remember Dan Forsett was watching his phone. I feel like everybody's on their phone trying to figure out, did it hit the rim or not, right? Like if you're in the building, is that where you're looking at? I guess because did they even show it in the video board or no?
Oh yeah, no, they showed it a lot of times. They showed it, and they showed it, and it was kind of in sync with what you're watching on the broadcast, so you can hear the crowd react to the replays and react really strongly when they show the ball from the atop the backboard viewpoint, and then react again when they showed the side angle where it's more nebulous. You just don't know. So we saw it, and I thought at the end that they will return it because I didn't think it hit the rim, but I understand why they stayed with that way because there wasn't indisputable visual evidence to overturn it.
Did it feel like an eternity in the building as they were like reviewing this? Like, what was it like waiting for it? Because on TV, they're showing the replay from different angles. They're showing Coach K's wife. They're showing the UCF section. I mean, the producers and directors at this point are building up the drama here, right? And Nance's like, this is the call of the tournament. I mean, what was that like in the building as you're all waiting?
Yeah, I think both wives got FaceTime during that. I think they showed Johnny Dawkins' wife as well. It took forever. And so I remember they asked Coach K about it after the game, and he just said to his guys, because they had like a 4 to 5 minutes, and he said, you guys were made for moments like this. And so that's really what he told RJ and Zion and those guys going into that long timeout. I don't know exactly what Johnny told his players, so I never got into that with him after the game or in our conversation since. But it took forever. It certainly seemed a lot longer than 4 minutes.
So UCF gets the call. They get the basket. They're up 74-70 at this point. After all that, in a mix of a 10-2 run at that point. And after all that, so Duke gets possession again. They force Trey Jones, takes a 3-point shot from the corner, misses basically almost the entire rim, Murph. UCF gets the rebound. And oh boy, here we go. This is the moment here where now we get to the nitty gritty here. They get the loose ball. It's 74-70. And Dayon Griffin gets the ball. They go up for the lob to Aubrey Dawkins. I'm going to let you describe it for the rest of the way.
Off the floor with it is Griffin. They've got 2-on-1. And the lob. And Dawkins lost it on the way up. Could have been 6.
Well, that could be a game changer, that mistake.
Meanwhile, Reddish. How about that? Down the wall. What a turn of events right there.
That was a 5-point swing. A layup, missed dunk opportunity.
Catch it first. Be sure. How about the step-up jumper?
Dayon had already thrown one successful lob to Aubrey. He's now 2-on-1 with Aubrey. Only RJ Barrett in his way. And I see it every time, and I just think it's a fine pass, it's a fine feed. Aubrey just can't handle it. Something slips, and he just doesn't grasp it. The ball comes out of his hands. What should have been a 76-70 game with about 1:50 to go, and UCF setting up at the defense, all of a sudden is only still a 4-point game. And then it was a big swing a few seconds later.
Yeah, Griffin got the rebound, was pushing it up, throws the lob, and Dawkins. And you see that the UCF bench was ready to explode. And I mentioned it earlier. 8:56 mark of the first half. Griffin threw a lob on the other side to Chad Brown, executed well. You mentioned it. He threw a lob early in the second half to Dawkins that worked.
Yeah. It was the 11:19 mark. It was Dawkins kind of coming around the screen, and it was Griffin from the top of the arc feeding Dawkins. And again, a good feed, and Dawkins had the alley-oop at the 11:15 mark of the second half. I want to mention this as well. And this is something that I don't think we talk about enough. Well, not that we should talk about it, but something that I think also plays a role in this. Do you remember how many dunks Aubrey Dawkins missed late in the year? Because he missed a lot. For those who don't remember, he missed 4 dunks in the win home against Memphis. Some of them were him trying to be really authoritative, and he just goes too hard and clings off the back of the rim. He missed a dunk against VCU. This had sort of become almost a thing late in the year because Aubrey had missed a lot of dunks. And maybe this is a little different because he didn't get a chance to do the dunk. He just didn't even make the catch. But it just reminded me in the moment of, oh, my God, he missed another dunk. Actually, I think I tweeted it out. I did. At the moment, I said, Aubrey, I tweeted out, I said, Aubrey misses another dunk, ! Because at that range, at that point in the season, he had missed so many. It was in my brain now, and he was the best dunker on the team. I think he won a dunk contest with the team before the season started. He's the best high flyer on the squad, but for some reason he couldn't finish some baskets close to the rim late in the year, and unfortunately none more impactful than that one.
So let's get in because there was a lot of debate about this play in the aftermath. Yeah. There were people that said they should have pulled the ball back. Can't run that. It's too high of a risky play. Dayon Griffin's not a ball handler. He's not used to that. I'll be honest with you, Murph. A year ago, I thought the same thing. Why not pull it back? But watching it again and watching Dayon execute a similar plays earlier in the game, I kind of changed my mind now. I have no problem with the play because it was a good pass. He did a fine play. And here's the thing. You're the underdog here. You got to go for the knockout. You execute that play, I think this game's over. You won the game. That's the knockout punch. You pull it back, there's no guarantees you get a good quality shot. You get tentative. Now you're playing not to lose. I give the kids I just think it was a bad break in that situation. Your thoughts?
It's a 2-on-1. It's a 2-on-1. What are you going to, not take advantage of that? I understand that people may not like the alley-oop and that the inherent risk with that, but it was a good pass. The location of the pass as far as where it hit Aubrey, it wasn't off target. It's just that he didn't grasp it. And I don't know. It's just bad luck. It's all it is. It's just bad luck. And I understand how it turned the game around. I mean, really, its impact, and we should note, would not have been probably as monumental if Cam Reddish, who had been a complete non-factor in the second half because he was in foul trouble, comes down and hits a quick 3 within 6 seconds. If he doesn't hit that 3, then we're probably still not talking about this. We're probably still saying that UCF might have won this game. But it was just a confluence of events, a 5-point swing within 5-6 seconds that it gets talked up more. But I'm not gonna berate or besmirch the play. I mean, what do you want? 2-on-1? Go from and we talked about on this podcast that Dayon had made good entry passes, good feed passes to alley-oops twice earlier in this game, and so he's fine with that. Aubrey's a fantastic dunker who had already put down an alley-oop a few minutes earlier. I have no problem with that play. You had to go for it. It would have been the nail in the coffin. It would have been emphatic. That place would have been erupting.
It's an iconic play. It's an iconic play if it happens, right? That's the moment everybody remembers. It goes down as maybe the most memorable UCF play in any sport history.
Oh, wow. Possibly.
Because of the ramifications. That's the play that helped knock Duke out. Certainly you could argue the Hale Perriman, but again, that's a conference championship on the line. We're talking the biggest stage here, and you're about to knock off Duke. You're about to knock out the #1 player in the NBA draft, the guy that's going to be a superstar in sports, in Zion Williamson. This is a big deal. beyond just the UCF realm. This is a big thing nationally. And I think that play would have been highlighted over and over.
And because it was so strong, right? It would have been literally a knockout punch of Aubrey Dawkins just slamming it down emphatically.
Twitter would have exploded.
The emotions would have been out. I mean, it would have been crazy to see. And you saw a glimpse of it because you saw UCF's bench start to react, and then the immediate heartbreak of, he didn't get it.
And you mentioned Reddish. He hits the three, so it's a 5-point swing, which always happens in sports, right? You miss a layup, boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
So it's 74-73. UCF gets a possession. Aubrey shoots a fadeaway, in and out. Oh. How did that not go in? It was
No, and no one talks about that shot, but how did that shot not go down? I mean, even the shots he missed should have been made.
Unbelievable. Duke gets possession, 74-73, and Duke tries, and again, take me through that sequence there, Murph. 74-73 now, UCF's on defense. And a foul is called, loose ball. They go to the free throw line, and with what's his name, Javin Delariere, who was a 58% free throw shooter, misses the first.
Mm-hmm.
Misses the first free throw. And that's the thing, right? We talk about free throws missing. This was ironically a game where UCF actually won the free throw battle against Duke. Both of these team coaches, Coach Dawkins has learned this from Coach Krzyzewski. You want to be able to make more free throws than your opponent attempts. UCF did that in this game, and they won the free throw battle. Duke misses 2 free throws. Tacko gets the rebound. Interestingly, Duke does not foul. In fact, I think Raftery, somebody may have mentioned, hey, I would have thought about fouling Tacko there, but they don't. They let UCF get possession, and then BJ draws a foul on Zion, which is Zion's 4th, to get him to the free throw line under a minute to go in this point.
Well, even the foul on Delorier, there was some speculation about who the foul was on initially.
Yes.
Was it on Tacko, who was there, or was it on Terrell Allen?
Right.
Fortunately for UCF, it was on Allen reaching in, but Tacko was right there. And then, BJ comes down, and boy, if this isn't a mirror image of something that's going to happen later in this game, it's BJ driving right off a screen and trying to create contact with his body, which, by the way, he did magnificently in this game. He did it with Reddish once. He did it with Zion here. BJ got to the free throw line so often. He was one of the best in the nation at getting to the free throw line last season. He just knows how to use his body in the air to create contact and get fouls. And he hits 2 big ones here, and that really sets us up for an incredible couple possessions in the final 45 seconds.
Well, you mentioned he went to the line 10 times, made 9 out of 10, and I think it was smart by him because he knew he didn't have his jump shot that night. So why not try to force the issue and go to the basket, draw some fouls, and get to points that way? So now it's 76-73. Duke's trying to figure out what they want to do, and Zion shoots a 3 in and out, but Duke gets an offensive rebound. Big offensive rebound.
Yeah, Delorier gathers it on over. I mean, he didn't go over them, but he's behind both Tacko and Aubrey, and Delorier ends up with it.
And so now, because of that, everybody's kind of like off script here a little bit. Zion's being guarded by BJ with 16 seconds. He goes on BJ, drives to the basket. BJ falls down. Zion contacts into Tacko. Whistle, basket goes in, foul on Tacko. Tacko fouls out. Crowd goes berserk for Duke. Nance goes crazy. So 2 parts on this play. A lot of people felt, did Zion commit a charge on BJ? Did he push off on BJ with the elbow, number 1? And then number 2, was that a foul on Tacko when Zion drove into him? Your thought? I mean, there's multiple aspects of this play that still to this and will always be dissected.
Yeah, and now the BJ playing defense on Zion. First of all, playing really good defense on Zion, guarding his left hip because Zion wants to go left, right? So he's forcing him to go right. And Zion drives, as he is wont to do. Then I had to say, so I'm looking at that and saying it's probably not a charge. That's not a charge. There's not a whole lot of give there with the off arm again. So it's probably not a charge. However, the precedent of this had been set already. Zion made the same play going the opposite direction against Aubrey Dawkins 2 minutes earlier, where Zion was driving left, extended his off arm a little bit, and they got the call. The same thing happens here, and it's the same play, and this time UCF does not get the call. That is sort of maddening. I would have liked it if they were consistent. That's all I really wanted was if they hadn't called one and then didn't call the other, that's fine. But if you're going to call one, you have to call the second one too. It's the same thing.
And that's where people get frustrated, fans get upset with refs and things, right? And I'm sure the UCF's thinking the same thing. BJ's thinking the same thing. He just saw Aubrey do a similar thing earlier. Why am I, and you could see it. It's more, and actually you could argue that the Zion BJ, there's a little more clear elbow there than there was on the Aubrey foul. So
a little more, but given the situation there, Eric, and the time and situation, that is not really a call that I know they want to make.
Correct.
I understand that.
Right. No, I agree with you, and I'm okay with that, but I think the frustration is why did you call it the one on Aubrey earlier, which was a couple minutes earlier?
Exactly. It's the same play, and if you're going to call that one, you got to call this one. The fact that they didn't do it there, it is disheartening because it's not consistent. The Tacko thing, I really have less of a question with. That is a foul. That is a foul on Tacko, definitely. He brings his arms down. He contacts Zion. His feet are in the paint. He is not planted to the ground. That is a foul on Tacko. I have no qualm with that.
We kind of take it for granted, but that's a hell of a finish by Zion, by the way. Oh yeah, he just went over and bumped into the 7'6" guy and scored. Like, that's not easy.
He drives with his offhand through a guard, spins in the lane, jumps up into a 7'6" guy, and with his shoulders basically pointing toward the Duke bench, throws it in with his right hand. With his left hand. I mean, that's amazing. It's an amazing play by Zion Williamson.
So after all that, Zion goes to the line. Down one, 76-75, 14.4 seconds to go. Short. He misses it short. R.J. Barrett gets the rebound, puts it back up, scores to give Duke a 77-76 lead with 11 seconds to go. UCF brings it up. Aubrey calls the timeout at 7.7. I think they added 0.4 of a second to make it 8 seconds. But let's get back to that. R.J. Barrett, offensive rebound. And I didn't catch it at first, but later on you see a little nudge on Aubrey behind the back. Should they have called a push-off on R.J. Barrett there on Aubrey? And it was interesting. I remember Mark Daniels, again, who called the game on the radio days after that, mentioned that even the UCF bench had warned the refs, watch out for the push-off. Watch out, and Aubrey, and you even see on the TV, Aubrey singling push off. None called. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I understand. I know of any of the controversial calls as far as penalties in this game that people think or that people review the most or think that are most controversial. This is the one, right? This is the one because it gives Duke the lead and ultimately is the last point scored in this game. There certainly is a push in the back with RJ's left hand against Aubrey. His right hand is kind of grabbing his right arm a little bit, but there's not a whole lot of contact there. If there's any contact, it's the push in the back with the left hand. However, Eric, it's not totally egregious to where they're going to call that. They're just not going to call that at that stage of the game. It's not like he really extends his arm out. And I think Aubrey here, part of it is the push in the back, but part of it is Aubrey just sort of jumps, I think, a little too soon. And I understand people may not like that explanation, but you look at it over and over and over again. I don't see enough there to where I'm like, that's an egregious miss. There's a little push in the back. I get it. But it's not something that I thought that if they called it, I wouldn't have been the other way. I wouldn't have been like, oh, it's an awful call. It's just like it's just in the gray area. And it's really, as much as people want that foul to be called there, I can understand why they didn't call it. It's just not a whole lot there.
Well, I think a lot of UCF fans in our audience will disagree with you, but but that's just what it is. I agree with. I mean, look, I don't personally. If I've covered the NBA in college, I don't depend on the ref to blow a whistle in the final seconds. I mean, and I know some people are bothered by that. Like, well, if it's a foul in the 2 minutes in, it should be a foul at the end. But that's not how it works. That's not human nature. People want the players to decide it. They don't want to be remembered as, hey, I called the foul, right? Because people are more likely to remember when you blew a foul, you called a foul at the end than when you don't call a foul. Look at the Michael Jordan play, the famous play against Byron Russell and the Utah Jazz. He pushed off on Byron Russell, but they didn't call it.
But he absolutely pushed off. I mean, he really pushed off.
Right, but they didn't call it. They didn't call it. And it's an iconic moment that people celebrate. right? Whereas if they call it, it doesn't happen. So, I mean, that's an evidence right there. And I learned that as I was young. Hey, they're just not going to call it. And that's okay. I'm okay with that. Personally, if I was a player, I would rather it come down to me than a whistle, unless it was egregious. And I think that's what you're saying, Murph. This was not egregious.
No, it wasn't. I mean, yes, he pushed him in the back. But again, people don't like the answer because they think a foul is a foul. But given the time and situation, there are certain things that just are not called. Refs will and should allow players to decide it. And in that sense, you can see the left arm extend a little bit. But it wasn't like he pushed him with both hands out of the way and really extended both arms. I mean, it was fairly slight, and I understand why they didn't make the call there.
All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to let people calm down right now. I'm sure there's people right now yelling at Murph and me, and yelling especially at Murph. You're wrong, you're wrong. We're going to take a break, our last break, and when we come back, we'll dissect the play, the final play, and then the aftermath, after what ensued after that, and what if. We'll address all that as you're listening to this special edition of the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast, UCF Rewind, back at the UCF in men's basketball March to Madness. And welcome back. It's Black and Gold Banneret Podcast special here, UCF Rewind. We look back at the UCF March to Madness, back at the UCF Duke Classic. Eric Lopez here alongside Brian Murphy. All right, Murph, so we've given people their ample opportunity. Here we go. The play that obviously will be remembered forever, not just from UCF fans, Duke fans, but just college basketball fans. The final play of the game, we had left off. Duke has the lead. UCF calls timeout. What play, in your mind, are you thinking would you like Johnny Dawkins to call here? Go through your mind here right prior to the play. What do you think UCF is going to call? What should they call?
Well, you wanted them to get something open for Aubrey, right? And even Bill Raftery says Taylor or Dawkins. And I agree with that. But for me, I was thinking you've got to get something where you kind of flash Aubrey open. However, the reason why that couldn't happen, because Aubrey set a screen for BJ. BJ got the ball out of bounds. Aubrey set the screen for BJ, and then RJ Barrett fronts Aubrey very well, really not allowing him any way to catch a ball. So really, it's up to BJ to make a play from there. And to BJ's credit, he said after the game, he really got the shot he wanted. It's a shot that we've seen him take 1,000 times. It's a play that he made twice in this game already to draw fouls, going to his right, kind of going off glass to try to bank it in or draw contact. He doesn't get the call. The ball hits the backboard, rolls off the rim, but then flying out of nowhere, if you want to pick it up from there.
Well, they put 0.4 of a second back, so it was 8.1. You mentioned with the play with BJ. Did you feel that BJ was trying to draw a foul there?
I think he would like to have. I mean, it was kind of giving himself two options. Either I can make this shot, which I know I can make, because, again, we've seen BJ make that off-balance, outside the paint runner off glass. We've seen him make that shot 1,000 times. So that's fine. And if he doesn't make it, maybe I'll draw a foul. And he does draw some contact on Trey Jones there, but certainly not enough to draw a foul. He tries to jerk his head back to sort of sell it, but it's good defense. And so neither of those things sort of work. But I thought BJ says, too, that they got the shot they wanted.
And they might have gotten a tip. They got it. Aubrey Dawkins flies out of nowhere, not boxed out, Murph, and puts the tip in. And somehow, we still, to this day, I don't know how that ball didn't go in.
All right, the pre-tournament favorite. Can it survive the last 8.1 seconds?
Got to be Taylor or Dawkins.
And UCF pull off the shocker. Here we go. Inbound out to Taylor. Jones is on him. Taylor driving in, banks it up. No, put back, in and out. And Duke survives just barely.
And Jim Nantz has that famous call. It doesn't get in and out, and Duke survives, which I thought was a fantastic call. And you know, people like dorks like me only catch this stuff because if he says Duke wins, right, there's probably UCF fans are now annoyed even more, right? Like, oh, Duke wins. But the way by saying it, the way he said it, Duke survives, really illustrated what this game was, which is basically Duke just literally survived. They just survived this game, which I felt was a compliment to UCF. But just heartbreak on the tip, and then it goes, of course, the directors they knew you were right on it. Mike Krzyzewski hugging Johnny Dawkins. You could tell the tears in their eyes. Unbelievable television. You're a movie buff. If you pitch this idea to Hollywood for a movie, I think it gets canceled, right? It would get rejected. People would scoff like, "Oh, this is too corny." But it really is. We'll get into that. But like the tip, how did it not go in, Murph?
Well, it was, like I said, in the lead to my game story after this game was 1 point and 2 centimeters. That's all that separated UCF from shocking the basketball world. And it really is that. It's just bad luck. Again, it's the perfect way for UCF to draw up this final 7.7 or 8 seconds where BJ drives right, takes a shot, he makes a lot, misses it, but Aubrey hustles, just totally outruns Cam Reddish, who doesn't move, outruns RJ Barrett, who doesn't move, flies through the air. And wouldn't it be so apropos for Aubrey Dawkins on the day that he had facing that team, playing for his father, who played for the coach he's facing and all that stuff? It would have been so apropos for that basket to go down, and yet it doesn't. It somehow rolls out. Somehow Aubrey put a little too much momentum behind it. I mean, it's just, and it's not that he missed the shot. The shot just didn't go in. It wasn't like anything he did wrong. It's just bad luck. And then from there, the emotions that you could see right as the buzzer sounds, right even before the buzzer sounds, Terrell Allen, hands over his face, collapsing backwards onto the floor. You see Zion roar as he's walking really stomping toward midcourt. Dayon Griffin's is just inconsolable on the sidelines. And then you see Johnny Dawkins and Coach Krzyzewski. Krzyzewski gives one of those like shrugs, like, I don't know what to say. Both men hug. And from there, the emotions just keep going, because you saw Tacko Fall crying in the line, and Coach K then talking to Cesar DeJesus and Dayon Griffin, trying to lift their spirits up. It was so emotional. For those who won and those who lost, even if you're watching it a year later, it's still emotional.
Where were you at this point in the game? Where were you? Are you down near the court? Are you still up in the press area? Where are you at this point? And then, can you sense the emotion that was going on right away after the game? The emotion, can you sense it even from your vantage point?
No. So actually, if you look at some of the replays, the replay from the opposite sideline, the sideline opposite the benches, you can see the replay of BJ's shot going off the backboard and then Aubrey collecting it. If you look up on the rafters on the left side of your screen, you'll see me with my hat on, and you won't see my face because I'm too busy videotaping the shot. I do have a recording of that shot from my vantage point way up there, but I had to capture it for perpetuity. I don't know if I tweeted it out. I don't think I did, because, God, why would the fans that follow me want to be reminded of this moment?
Right.
But I remember immediately looking at Terrell Allen, watching him fall backwards, and then looking toward Johnny Dawkins to see what emotion he was having. And Johnny, stoic as ever, man. It's amazing that man just has just one singular emotion, and he's just so composed. And even when Dawkins' shot doesn't fall, he just sort of claps his hands and walks toward Krzyzewski and hugs him. And it wasn't like he was jumping up and down. He didn't fall off his chair. He's just a composed gentleman. So and then from there, I had to submit a very quick game story that was really hard to write.
Oh my God!
My hands were just shaking. My hands were absolutely shaking. But that's what I saw before I left to go to the press conferences.
Speaking of that press conference, let's play the clip here, Murph, where you asked Aubrey Dawkins about that play in the tip-in.
Brian Murphy, Orlando Sentinel. Aubrey, if you could just sum up the last chance you had there and what you saw and what you felt immediately afterwards.
I had a chance at a put back on BJ's floater, and it just didn't go. Rolled around the rim. And I mean, heartbreak. That's one way to sum it up. I mean, we spent all this time, trying to get to this stage, and obviously you want our journey to continue. And so when that doesn't happen, when you invest this much in it, it breaks your heart.
Well, there's Aubrey Dawkins sort of taking you blow by blow by what happened there in the final 7 seconds. He mentioned the turn. He said it breaks your heart. He mentioned heartbreak a couple times during that press conference. And then right after he was done with my question, someone asked him, how long did it feel like the ball was on the rim after he tipped it? And he said an eternity. It was up there forever. And so it's just it did feel like that. And certainly if you watch it, it feels like that the ball is moving so slowly. You're waiting for it to be blown by some fate, some ghost back into the hoop, and to have it fall off like that. I love watching the crowd reactions too on the replays, watching people get this glee and the excitement on their face, and then have that drained away immediately by anguish and despair. It's kind of what makes sports so amazing, that this can bring all this out of us. But man, it was an emotional game, emotional day, and the post game was even more emotional. Certainly, I would say for Mike Krzyzewski as well. And I know we've got that. So here's Mike Krzyzewski talking about what it was like to be a coach in this game, coaching against a man in Johnny Dawkins, who he said was his first great player at Duke, coaching not only against him, but coaching against his son, who was around the Duke program a lot as a young kid. Here was Coach K had to say about that, and really having a hard time getting through his answer.
I love Johnny Dawkins. And the moments, the times that we've spent together and building the program, and 10 years on our staff, and the connections that we've had while he's at Stanford and Central Florida. He's a member of we're family. And I feel bad that they lost. I mean, I'm happy. It's like a yin and a yang here, because they were deserving of winning, and they were so good. And I'm so proud that those kids played at the level of their coach. And just it's hard to describe. That's why I hate. Obviously, we're happy we won. Because that should, unless you're an idiot. But although some of you might say that I fulfill that description. No, it's a tough moment, and it'll take me a little while to get through it, to be quite frank with you. Same thing with Aubrey. You see him grow up from a little guy. Even on our staff, Johnny was kind of like Nolan's father. Nolan's dad died early, and when Johnny was the assistant for us, Nolan really looked to Johnny as a father figure. And so Aubrey, for him, too, is like a brother. I mean, all these connections they're just hard to explain, but they're all true, and that's what makes this it makes it very difficult. And especially Aubrey was the best player on the court today. He was magnificent. And so there were so many good things, great things, and it was a great game because both teams played hard. I mean, really, we haven't had a team play any better against us than they did. They were fantastic.
So there's Coach K really expressing his love for Johnny Dawkins and Aubrey Dawkins. I love the story he told about Johnny being kind of a father figure, and Aubrey kind of bringing a younger brother to Nolan Smith. For those who might remember, Duke point guard Nolan Smith back about 10 years ago was a former first-round NBA draft pick. But the love that those two men shared, we asked them so many questions before the game about the matchup, and neither of them really wanted to say much about, other than just how much they love each other. And they're still in contact. Every couple of weeks they still call each other. And, I think Coach K understands how much of his success he owes to players like Johnny Dawkins for putting Duke on the map. And for Dawkins, the same thing. He owes his successes to what he learned from Coach Krzyzewski, and to have them play each other. It's something they don't like. Like we said with Danny White and Kevin White, they do not want to play each other. And it really hurts that one of them had to lose, and it hurts both of them that one of them had to lose. And give credit to Krzyzewski, who said in that game or in that clip that Aubrey was the best player on the floor. And certainly you can make an argument for that.
There's no question about that. And it was emotional for Johnny Dawkins as well, who was asked about facing Coach K and what Coach K meant to him in the postgame as well, a little later on in that postgame. And here's what Coach Dawkins talked about facing Coach K.
I never thought, we'd be in this position. It's tough. I mean, like you said, we're family, and, our embrace was one, I love that man. That man, without him, I wouldn't be where I am today. And so he's meant a lot to me, throughout my life. And that's what type of an embrace it was.
And that was Coach Dawkins after the game, talking about his relationship with Mike Krzyzewski meant to him and the emotions of that. And I know you've talked to him long after this game, since. What did this game mean for him? What did it do to him? You've had a chance to talk to him even weeks and months after this. I remember they asked him in the postgame, can you put it in words in these games? It's like it's too soon and things like that. You've had a chance to talk to him many a time since, even in the summer after that game. Take me through it, knowing Johnny, what goes through his mind when you bring this game up and you bring up Coach K.
When I brought this up to him before I talked to him before the NBA draft, right before we were waiting to see where Tacko and Aubrey were going to go. And, he said that he and Aubrey certainly reflected on the game. And he still is he just kind of said the same thing about how proud he was of his guys to perform the way they did at a really high level. He's still very proud. And he didn't say much about, Krzyzewski playing against him. I know he didn't like it. I know he didn't like the fact that they had to go up against each other. I thought one thing was interesting was he said that he hadn't rewatched the game. This was back in June, and I told him then that he really should because the game is really great. And he responds, "Yeah, for you." And I get that. I get that. Like, why would he want to watch something over and over again that he lived? Like, he was there. Not, we're there as fans and as media, but he's there all year round, coaching these guys, mentoring these guys, drawing up plays, and up through the ups and downs, you get to this moment. And this is how all of it ends. All of it ends. And for him to, why would he want to watch it? I remember him saying that the two toughest games that he's ever had, and the games he'll never rewatch, are this one and the championship game that Duke played against Louisville in 1986. Yep. And Louisville beat Duke. He goes, those are the two games I will never watch. And I watch a lot of tape, as you can imagine. So I thought it was great for him to say that, and give credit to the UCF players and Coach Dawkins. They came out for this press conference, BJ, Tacko, Aubrey, and Coach, after the locker room clip that went viral in the wake of this game, where you've got Dawkins talking to the team, and the emotion there is raw. You can hear Chad Brown almost wailing in the background with tears. And then the hugs that everyone's got, Chad Brown breaking down the team in a huddle, which he can hardly get through. The shared moments between Coach Dawkins and Tacko Fall, and then the hug from Coach Dawkins to his son Aubrey saying, you gave it your best shot. What else can you do? You gave it your best shot. And Aubrey just sort of collapsing on the chair behind him. It was an emotional moment, and the thing that those guys came out for this press conference after that, they really pulled themselves together to do something that I know a lot of players and coaches hate to do. But I want to ask them a certain question. I asked for all three players that are up there, BJ, Tacko, and Aubrey. How did they feel about the effort they put forth against the number one team in the nation? Here's how they responded.
To all three players, if you could just quickly sum up how you guys feel about the effort you put out there against the number one team in the nation.
Tacko first, Aubrey, and then RJ. BJ.
I feel like all the guys came in ready to go from the jump. Everybody gave their best efforts. Even the bench was very active throughout the whole game, very involved. We left it all out there. I don't know what to say right now because, the emotions, but I'm very proud of, the guys, and I mean, it didn't go our way at the end of the day, but we left it all out there, and that's all you can ask.
Same as Tacko, I'm very pleased with how we played. I think we played really hard and gave our best effort, and that's all you can ask for. Yeah, it's a great game for us.
Yeah, I mean, we left it all out there. We played as hard as we could. I think we showed a lot of people, across the country that, we were a serious basketball team, and that, we really could play with anybody. I know coming into this game, a lot of people had us losing by 15 plus to these guys, and they're a great team. And their coach said they fought and they played extremely hard. But I think, we represented UCF, as best we could, and I think we did everything we could to win that game. It just came down to a couple plays.
So those were the immediate reactions of Tacko Fall, Aubrey Dawkins, and BJ Taylor following this Duke game. And I love BJ's quote there about how some people thought we would come into this game and lose by 15 plus to these guys, but they played really hard and represented UCF as best they could. It just came down to a couple plays, and it came down to a couple plays. It came down to a couple centimeters. It's just that thin of a margin of victory and defeat, and it's the hardest game that UCF fans probably have to watch. At least arguably the toughest game to watch. But for me, I've watched this thing now, I think 10 times. It's amazing television. It's amazing theater. I never get tired of it. It's the game of the year by far. It's one of the best games in UCF history, even though they lost it. There's just so much to marvel at and to be proud at over the way they performed. And, it didn't go their way. But, oh, my God, the journey to get to these last 7 seconds was magnificent.
It's a game that's going to be replayed over and over again. It's probably a top 50 NCAA tournament game of all time. And now it turns out Duke would get knocked off in the Elite Eight by Michigan State up in D.C. They don't.
Well, even then, Duke almost got knocked off against Virginia Tech.
Oh, yeah. But they lose. And I think the reason I bring it up is, had Duke gone on to win the national title, I think this game even grows in its legacy, right? Like top 10, becomes a top 25 game of all time. I still think this game can grow in legacy depending on what happens with Zion Williamson in the end in his NBA career. He was having a great rookie year when he played. You could sense it. He's going to be exciting. That's going to add to the legacy of this game. It reminds me of kind of the '84 North Carolina Indiana game and the Georgetown North Carolina game in '82 national title game, because Michael Jordan legacy grew in his pro career, and I think added to those games years and decades later. Like, oh, wow, Michael Jordan with that shot. Mike Jordan, losing to Indiana. Oh, wow, that was a big deal. Things like that. And I think that could still happen with this game. R.J. Barrett ended up drafting by the New York Knicks. Did not have a great rookie year. Too early to tell. What does that mean? Cam Reddish drafted goes to the Atlanta Hawks. Not a great rookie year. We'll see what happens. But what's fascinating about this kind of was the liftoff. All of this benefited Tacko Fall. He goes in, does not get drafted, signs with the Celtics, becomes the story of the Summer League. The fans are chanting for him. He signs a deal with the Celtics, and he's been back and forth with the G League and the Celtics, and he's a fan favorite in the league. People are generally excited to see this guy play. And I think that's been there's a lot of positives. You mentioned it. Yes, we lost the game on the scoreboard, but there was a lot of positives UCF got from this game, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the recognition alone, just nationally, and the credit they got, not only for how they performed. I remember how they performed on the court was one thing, and how they took Duke to the absolute limit. But then also, I thought people really responded well to that clip of the locker room conversation, and seeing Coach Dawkins talk to his team after the game, and seeing the emotion that they shared, and being very open about it, and talking about, we said before we came here that we're going to end in one of two ways. We're going to end up celebrating, or we're going to end in tears. And we end in tears because we invested so much into this. And I think people saw that, and not only grew respect for UCF and as a program, but the man who leads the program, and Johnny Dawkins. And I remember talking to Johnny about that clip and how the response from that has been really positive. And he just he hopes people saw that, it's a basketball team, but he wants people to know that we're more than just basketball players. We care about our young men as men, and he hopes that people got that out of that clip.
B.J. Taylor would move on. Obviously, he's playing in the G League. Chad Brown ended up playing in the G League out of this game. Aubrey Dawkins declared, not a real shocker, declared this would be his last game. What a way to go out for Aubrey Dawkins, though. One of the most incredible, iconic performances by any UCF player that put on a basketball jersey, black and gold jersey. Breathtaking performance.
I mean, I thought that Aubrey was going to declare anyway, going into the AAC tournament even. I mean, he'd had a good enough season, and he was 20. Don't forget, he's 24 years old. He had to take a redshirt season, then he missed a season with a shoulder labrum tear. So he had been in college long enough. It was time for him to move on. The exclamation point was certainly this game, where it's like, oh my God, he's outplaying the possible two top picks in the upcoming draft. And I remember I talked to Aubrey after he signed with the Pelicans. I believe I talked to him on Independence Day, and I asked him, like I asked his father, I said, have you watched the game ever again? And he goes, I probably not. I never will. I do not have an itch to watch the game. It's hard every time. It's funny, he mentioned that they bring it up often because obviously he's teammates in the summer league with Zion, but he really wouldn't get into what their talks have been like. He calls it basically fun banter back and forth, and gave respect to Coach K for calling him the best player on the floor that day. But I think like father, like son, neither Dawkins will ever watch this game again.
Which is arguably his best game he's ever played. That's unbelievable, and he can't watch it because of the pain on that game. So let's play the what if game here, Murph. Always a fun game. If the ball goes in, Aubrey's tipping. UCF advances to the Sweet 16 to play Virginia Tech in D.C. What happens here? Do you think they beat Virginia Tech? Where does this story end, right? That's always the number one what if. Where does this, if they win that game? First of all, if they win that game, the program just skyrockets, right? I mean, it's all everybody's talking about. The Cinderella team that knocked off Duke. Oh, my God, that was Zion's last game. And now you're flying to D.C. and you're playing Virginia Tech. Do they show up and play a great game and knock off Virginia Tech? Or do they have kind of hangovers and lose to Virginia Tech? I think is the question. I don't know the answer to that. The only thing I think I know, Murph, I think it ends, even if they beat Virginia Tech, I think it ends against Michigan State in the Elite Eight. I just think they run out of gas. Michigan State was so good. You'll never know. But I do wonder what happens if they win that game, they play Virginia. What happens? Obviously, you're probably at that point, some point that night, you're trying to find a flight to D.C., right?
Yeah.
And as many people probably are at that point.
No, absolutely. And I think more than anything, I think about not the Sweet 16 and how nice that would have been, the stage, but the 5 days of publicity in between. What that would have been like for this program. That would have been nuts because Tacko Mania would have gone to another stratosphere. We would be talking about Aubrey Dawkins more, about what he can do on the next level. We'd be talking about everybody more. And I think that those 5 days of free press is something I think about a lot. Now, when they beaten Virginia Tech, who, by the way, almost beat Duke as well, they had 2 shots to win it at the buzzer and lost by 2 points. I don't know. Possibly. I mean, Virginia Tech was a very good team with Nikhil Roby-Coleman and Justin Robinson. But I'm not going to play that game. I would just more think about the fact that what the aftermath would have been like specifically with this program for the next 5 days, returning home to Orlando as sort of, kind of like champions almost, I mean, they'd be treated like champions. And then going to Washington, D.C., there's a storyline there about obviously Terrell Allen is kind of from the nearby area, so he would have some family, I'm sure.
Ironically, that would come into play later on in the offseason.
Sure would. But also I want to mention, and I brought it up a little earlier in the podcast, so Aubrey Dawkins, has this magnificent game and scores 33 points, but Tacko Fall is the best player on the floor. He ends this game in a 1-point loss with a plus 15 rating. And I know plus minus isn't everything, But my God, when they took him off the floor, when he had to come out because he was in foul trouble, this was an entirely different type of game. And when he was on the floor, either changing shots or blocking shots, I believe he really did stonewall Zion 4 times in this game, and Zion never dunked on him once. The best play Zion made against him all day was the and one at the end of the game to foul Tacko out, but Zion never dunked on him, and Tacko was an absolute game changer on both ends. I thought he had the best game of anybody overall.
What else jumps out from the box score since you're looking at it? What stands out to you that either shakes your head or you're something that you'll kind of think about with this game that comes to mind?
Yeah, it's too bad that B.J. Taylor's career has to end, with a 2 for 10 shooting night. I mean, big shot Barry. He had that massive 3 that I said was my favorite moment of the game, and it really is with about 4 minutes to go. But, before then, he was really 1 for 7 to start and took some rush shots in the first half, and I thought maybe played outside of his game a little bit. I think that's unfortunate, and you would like to see a little bit more out of him. And not that I thought that he played poorly. It's just that I feel bad that his career ended with that kind of game where I'm sure he knows that, he could have played better and he didn't. And that's unfortunate.
If the tip-in goes in, is it the greatest win in UCF athletics history?
Probably not. People still think about the Peach Bowl over Auburn as being more significant. And I would probably agree, but part of that's because football is so much a bigger part of the ecosystem, right? Where basketball is great, baseball can be good, we'll follow it, but football, people live and die with it. So winning that game, winning the Peach Bowl probably means more. And then I would probably argue that because if they beat the number 1 team in the nation, one of the best college basketball teams of all time, with all the storylines around it, I would probably argue for this, but I understand that it probably wouldn't be because of the impact that Peach Bowl game not only put on UCF football team, but UCF the university.
The only thing I'll counter with, no one's playing back highlights of UCF Auburn Peach Bowl, right? Like nobody's like, oh, hey, outside of like a UCF fan, nobody's like, hey, remember that game? Remember that? Nobody remembers that game. Whereas people would have remembered this play, this win. Like I feel like for the next 5 to 10, 20, maybe a handful of years, if you flew, you traveled, hey, where you UCF? Oh, yeah, I remember you. You guys knocked off Duke and Zion. I feel like that would have been the conversation for the coming months and years. That the casual person, I'm not talking about the diehard sports fan, I'm talking about the casual Joe fan, the Joe person that walks around, because that's the uniqueness of the NCAA tournament. It brings a lot of people that don't normally watch sports into it. And with that time slot. And I feel like a lot of people would have remembered UCF for that win more than anything football has done, even with more football, even more about the national title claim, any of that stuff. I think they would have remembered more because this was a lasting impact. You knocked off Duke, who everybody knows. There would have been a portion of people out there that would have been excited. Hey, thanks for beating Duke. I've always hated Duke. You know what I mean? Like, it was very, and so I think if that tip-in goes in, it is the greatest moment in UCF athletics because I think more people that are not UCF fans would have remembered this game and would have remembered UCF on a positive light, and it would have just skyrocketed. Kind of like I wrote about this on Black and Gold Banneret in the fall. I would argue right now, Murph, that Tacko Fall is the most recognizable, most popular UCF athlete in sports. I think when people think of UCF sports, I think he has surpassed Shaquem Griffin in a way because every time you see Tacko, he stands out. He was in the middle of the storyline in the slam dunk contest and was trending because he was helping Aaron Gordon in the slam dunk contest. I interviewed Tacko when the Celtics were in Orlando the last time, and who comes over to say hello to Tacko Fall but the soccer international star Thierry Henry, the French superstar. Like, people generally are interested in like Tacko Fall, and I think that game, and in particular in that tournament run, put him on the national map, and then the NBA, and it took off from there, from the NBA and beyond. So my counter argument, yes, football is relevant. Football is more popular than basketball at UCF, but I think from a big picture standpoint in the country, I think if that tip-in goes in, I think that's what UCF's remembered for more.
It's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. I would have loved to have lived that alternate reality.
We all did. I would love to be having that debate right now. It'd be great.
And we all would have.
The one thing that
even as it is, I find this game, even if it's painful to watch, I implore those UCF fans who don't want to watch this because the ending is painful to not really look at that and look at the piece of work overall. You can cut out the last 2 minutes or last minute of the game if you want. That's fine. Kind of like how I cut out the bottom of the ninth inning of the 2001 World Series between the Diamondbacks and the Yankees. We all have our ways of looking back on games and then not wanting to remember the parts that hurt, and that's fine. But there are 38 other minutes of this game that are absolutely spectacular, and I think we've done a good job here of kind of hitting on every point because there's just so much drama and up and down, back and forth of great play among these teams. The storylines involved. It's a game that it's a classic. I know it didn't go the way that UCF fans wanted, but the way UCF played, as Krzyzewski said multiple times after the game, they deserved to win. They played better than us. You can watch that and see it. You can see it. And I think for that, I'll never get tired of watching this game.
It was a game that nationally drew an 8.8 rating, 12.88 million viewers watched that game. It was actually higher rate. More people watched that game than the semifinals or the Final Four. To give you an idea how big of a number that is the most watched UCF sporting event by the country in the nation. The UCF Baylor Fiesta Bowl in 2014, in comparison, did a 6.6 rating, 11.3 million viewers. The UCF LSU Fiesta Bowl from 2019 had 8.4 million viewers, did a 5 rating. The UCF Peach Bowl win against Auburn, you mentioned, 8.3 million viewers, did a 5 rating on that game. The UCF South Florida, the War and I-4 game on Black Friday in 2017, 4.7 million. That did a 3.2 rating. Obviously, nationally, Zion is a big part of that. That will be the critics that will tell me that. Okay, fair enough. So here's what I have for you. In response to that, the local numbers. The local rating for the UCF Duke game in the Orlando-Daytona market, Murph, 12.2 rating, which means basically equates to over 200,000 people in this market watch the UCF Duke game. It is the 4th most watched UCF sporting event in the local market history. 4th. It did a 12.2. The UCF Baylor game in the Fiesta Bowl 2014 did a 17 local rating. The Peach Bowl against Auburn did a 16 rating, very interestingly. And then the LSU Peach Bowl, which was a couple of months earlier, did a 14 rating. Those are the only 3 UCF sporting events that did a higher number than this UCF Duke basketball game. The South Carolina, very interesting, by the way. I don't know if people realize this. The highest rated UCF regular season football game locally was the 2013 South Carolina game with Steve Spurrier. Did a 11.5 rating. Yeah. The Black Friday game against USF in 2017 did an 11.1 local rating. The 2018 American Conference Championship game did a 10.7 rating. Those are your top 7 most watched local UCF sporting events in the Orlando-Daytona market. Just to give you a perspective. By the way, the VCU win did a local rating of an 8, which accounts to about 114,314 viewers. That was the most watched UCF basketball game ever in the market up until 2 days later with the Duke game. It is among the top 10 most watched UCF sporting events ever locally. Nationally, that game did a 3.3 million viewers, by the way. Did 3.3 million.
So can you go back to just the two UCF Duke numbers, the rating and the millions of people who watched it nationally? What was the rating and the millions of viewers?
An 8.8 national rating, 12.88 million viewers across the country. Number one program of that weekend.
And so I know that some of this it makes a difference because the Sweet 16 game was on a Friday night, and people may not have been home from work yet. And the Duke game against UCF was on a Sunday.
Right.
But the Sweet 16 game with Duke and Virginia Tech was a 6.1 with about 10 million viewers.
Yep.
And I will say that although certainly some of that is because of the weekend showing, weekend afternoon spotlight, some of that is because people had heard and wanted to see not only Zion, but Zion versus Tacko. UCF brought in a good amount of that audience because that matchup, as I said at the start of this podcast, although I didn't think it was the best storyline, it was by far the sexiest.
Yes.
And people wanted to watch that sort of, again, it was sort of a sideshow. They want to watch these two like incredible athletes go at it. And so that's why I think that number, as much as when people talk about Zion and Duke getting numbers, UCF certainly played a noticeable, significant part in that.
I agree. That's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up because, right, UCF Virginia Tech, it's just ACC versus ACC. It's, whatever. This was, you had David and Goliath to some extent. You had Tacko and Zion, Dawkins and Coach K. Is Duke going to get knocked off the Sunday prime slot? Interestingly, that last half hour of that game, right, which went into the 7 p.m. hour Sunday night, which is a prime time hour.
Yeah.
Drew 16.18 million viewers, which is an enormous number. In fact, locally, when I was talking to people that do follow this stuff, locally, that UCF Duke game, that last half hour was the most watched half hour of any UCF sporting event ever. More than any of the bowl games. People just tuning in. Now, there's various of reasons for that, right? Oh, shoot, there could be an upset. This game's coming down to the wire, right? Because a lot of basketball ratings, a lot of times their bigger numbers are down the stretch when the game is tight, right? Plus, you have people that are watching 60 minutes. That's a 60 minutes programming is about to come. And so, but that's when everybody's tuned in. Just an enormous number. And that's exposure. And UCF took advantage of it. And I think more people know about the UCF basketball program because of it. Certainly, as we talked about, more people know about Tacko Fall. People know more about it. It just is. And that's a game that will be kind of linked. And you mentioned it. It did a bigger number than the Virginia Tech game did in a Sweet 16, which was a Friday night game. I think Michigan State Duke did a better number, but that's an Elite Eight Sunday game. So, but again, it did better than the Final Four games.
Yeah, and Michigan State Duke, at that point, we thought Michigan State Duke was a game to win the championship. Those were, in my estimation, the two best, most complete teams entering the tournament. So that game, I understand why that game got a huge rating, because for many people, including myself, that game was whoever wins this is going to win the tournament. And then it didn't happen that way. But it is what it is. That's why that game got such a huge rating.
Yeah, but it definitely did better in the Final Four and things. It was just a lasting image of the game. Well, we've talked a lot about it. Give me your last thoughts as you will remember this game and this UCF team, because the way I look at it, yeah, they lost on the scoreboard, but there was a lot of wins here. Great memories from the season. They got to the tournament. They won an NCAA tournament game. They played. I mean, how can you not be proud if you were a UCF fan of that performance? And how can you not feel for them, leaving it all on the court afterwards? I just think that's what you're proud to be. If you're a UCF, that's what you're proud about. The pride and things like that. I remember at the time I wrote about it, and I compared it to Rocky, right? Rocky 1, where he may have lost to Apollo Creed or whatever, but boy, you were really impressed with Rocky. You were proud of Rocky's effort, which nobody gave him a shot to even make that a competitive fight. It was just a sense of pride and excitement. I remember after that game, I didn't know what to say, and I was speechless. But it was afterwards like, wow, what a performance! What a way! What? How can you not be proud of those guys? And you'll be remembered forever. I mean, I think Tacko, BJ, maybe even who knows, maybe Aubrey. They all eventually end up going to the UCF Athletic Hall of Fame. Maybe they do. But no, I think that team gets honored down the road, right? Whether it be a 5-year anniversary, 10-year anniversary, whatever, they'll be remembered. Very positive.
Yeah. Oh my God, that'll be tremendous. I remember, so once everything was over and I had to go write my story, and I even now I'll read my story and I kind of like it. So that was nice for me, just professionally, to not only be there, but I thought I wrote a pretty good game around. Off of that, once I was done, I went back to the spot where I was sitting because Oklahoma Virginia was wrapping up, which by the way was never a game. Virginia was just way much.
By the way, just as an afterthought, Virginia would not only blow out Oklahoma, they would go on and win the national title. Oh, by the way, but whatever, nobody cares.
I know it's hilarious. We knew, it's no surprise that the national title winner came out of that pod because Duke's there, and it was Virginia. We all watched the national title winning.
Just like we all thought, an ACC team won from that pod the national title, like we all predicted. That's all.
Absolutely. So that happened. And I remember, so I got back out there and I was watching the final seconds of that game. I literally got back out there with like a minute left in this game. And I called my father, who is a huge sports fan. He's the reason why I love sports. And he was watching, and he picks up, and he's in California, but he picks up, and the first 7 words I say to him are just the F word over and over and over and over again. That was how we started my conversation. I was just so, because you can't be, you try to be, kind of dead inside and unbiased and nonpartisan when you're doing these things, because you want to look at these things from a clear point of view. But once it was all over, I was so pissed. I was so pissed, and my dad was feeling for me as well. And I would love to go on to DC and gone on, but as it was, like I said, it didn't take me long to realize how good this game was. I think in the moment I knew that it was maybe the best thing I'd ever seen as far as a live sporting event. And again, I've watched it twice today. It's Tuesday, Monday. I watched it twice. And then I watched it once yesterday. I've seen this thing at least 10 times. It's a great game. It's an absolute classic. And I'll continue to watch it in the future, even if both Dawkinses will not. I will continue to watch it.
It's a game, right? I'll use a movie reference in closing here, since you're a movie buff. It's a game that years from now it still works, right? It's not out of date. It's still kind of renovate. It still works in today's era. It still will work 5 years from now as a great game and a sporting event, even if we don't like the result. But amazing event. Best sporting event you've ever been to?
It's close. If we want to foreshadow about things we've got coming up on this podcast down the road, I think the UCF 2017 football game was right up there. There were some other things too. But this was definitely close. I think the reason why I love this game so much, it's part of the reason why we love sports, is because it's just a game, and it's athleticism, and it's all, in the big scheme of things, it doesn't mean much, but the emotion it brings to the people involved, the players, the coaches, the fans, how much they want it, and to see the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. To see that played out so starkly in such clear terms, it's just more than a basketball game. It meant so much to a lot of people, and I think that's why we watch sports, to not only as a distraction, but also for these emotional roller coasters that make us feel alive at times. And my God, I still watch this game and I get chills, even though I know the ending. It doesn't matter. There are points in this game where I'm just absolutely excited to watch it. So I love it, and this is why we love sports, man. And one of the reasons why we love sports.
I'd rather have that moment, a heartbreak of losing, than not have that moment at all. And I think, if anything, we've learned that in 2020 with Dayton and other schools in the NCAA tournament in basketball that never happened, softball and baseball sports that never happened. I think maybe with all that, and that's my last word on this, maybe that makes you rethink about, you know what? Yeah, that was a painful loss, but boy, it was fun to watch. And you know what? I was glad to be a part of it. And I'd rather have that than the alternative.
Better to have loved than lost than to have never loved at all. And that game kind of sums it up.
Well said. And well teased, because yes, Murph, coming up down the road in future episodes here, we will break down, we promise, UCF wins. And Murph mentioned one of them. We'll mention the war in I-4, UCF and South Florida. We'll get you the backstory on that game, and leading up to that game, we'll also talk about the UCF Memphis game and that 2017 championship year, and dissect that national championship season and all the backstory from then. Well, that's coming up in some future episodes. We'll have some guests that were a part of it as well, and we'll have other UCF sporting events as well as time goes on. And again, you can send in your request at UCF_Banneret, where you can follow us on Twitter for all the latest in UCF athletics, and follow us as well on the blackandgoldbanneret.com. Murph, this was a pleasure. I know it was lengthy, but it was just good to talk basketball, good to talk UCF sports, and trying to reflect there. And I know you've reflected on it fondly and did a great job kind of breaking it down as somebody was there. But I always enjoyed doing this with you, and I look forward to doing more games with you here moving forward.
I'm exhausted, but it was well worth it.
That's Brian Murphy. I'm Eric Lopez. We hope you've enjoyed this special edition of the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast, UCF Rewind, back to the UCF basketball's March to Madness.